dispenses of item 5. Item number 7, update on the redevelopment of 505 West Chapel Hill Street. And we do have some cards. We do have some speakers who want to speak, but I want to see if the staff has any framing for us.
Good evening. Stacy Poston, City of Durham General Services Department, here this evening to provide another update on 505 West Chapel Hill Street. As a part of the discussion that happened at work session, staff is recommending a revision of the third motion, the second substantive motion, and I believe those are in your agenda packets. Happy to read it if council prefers, or available to answer questions.
All right. For the sake of the viewing public, would you just go ahead and read it if you don't mind?
Sure, absolutely. So the motion reads, to authorize the city manager to negotiate a non-binding term sheet outlining the terms of the development agreement and other required transactional documents with TPC 505 WCH, LLC for the base scenario request for proposal submission as necessary for the redevelopment of 505 West Chapel Hill Street with consideration of the potentiality of a ground lease structure and additional affordable units.
Thank you so much for that. Colleagues, I think that captures the spirit of the conversation we had, but before I go to comments from the public, Councilmember Cook, please.
I just have one quick question for staff. So I know that the developer received the motion or the language of this amended motion before the agenda was published and before it went out to the public. Is that something that normally happens? I just want to be able to communicate to constituents in the future.
I am not sure of the exact timing. I was doing a lot of communication, but those things happen at about the same time. So as we are drafting agenda motions and those are getting approved, we are communicating with the firm that we are recommending.
Is that something that might happen in the future? Is there, I'm just curious about to have a sense of when that might happen. I know a lot of community members were surprised by that. I was surprised by that because it was before I had the language as well. And so I was just curious if there was, how I can better communicate that to the public.
Right, so I am not sure at this very moment exactly what the timing was. I was doing a lot of communication with a lot of stakeholders that we've got going on, so I'm not sure if the publishing of the agenda happens on Friday, sometime during that Friday afternoon, so not sure exactly if the developer received the information prior to the publishing of it, but it was the intention that those things are happening generally simultaneously.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I know that they had it at least a full day before the agenda was published, so that was the question.
Okay.
And it might have been longer, I'm not sure.
Okay, I mean, the intention is that generally we are trying
around
to
the same time,
sort of with all of the stakeholders,
okay,
all the parts and pieces.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I just, like I said, people were surprised about it, so I just wanted to make sure.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else with questions? I do want to say for those who watched that work session, the language was pretty much crafted in real time with the presence of the developer there. So anything, and I believe the language keeps fidelity with the conversation that we had at the work session. There's nothing substantively different. I mean, that doesn't sound much different than what we said at the work session to me. But to Councilmember Cook's point, we certainly want to make sure that the folk get things at the same time. But I'm comfortable in that the developer was there when we all heard it. And for our purposes tonight, I think that fidelity is kept. But I do want to associate myself with certainly keeping vigilance. And to any member of the public that has any concerns, free up some time and watch some of our work sessions, or if you have time and nothing to do, they're archived as well. So I think there's a fidelity to what we discussed out loud at the work session with respect to the motion. Councilmember Riss, did you? Okay. All right. I'm going to turn now to members of the public. I'm going to well, first off, I'm going to start with our neighbors that are online. Madam Clerk, Stella Adams wishes to speak on this matter, and if you would enable her, if you see her in the queue.
Hello, can you hear me?
Ms. Adams, thank you. Good to hear you. Thank you for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council, my name is Stella Adams, and I am speaking today on behalf of the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People. The Durham Committee supports the letter sent on behalf of the 505 Project Coalition. That letter clearly states that we were dissatisfied with the city staff's RFP. While none of the proposals satisfied the needs expressed by the community, with the changes we are advocating, we could accept a modified proposal from Peoples. Peoples is a Black-owned firm, and it is the mission of the Durham Committee to create opportunities for Black businesses in Durham. Peoples had the highest percentage of MWBE participation of the considered candidates, and increasing MWBE participation is a key consideration of our participation. The Durham Committee stands firmly with the coalition in demanding that the city maintain ownership of the land to ensure affordability in perpetuity. The Durham Committee stands firmly with the coalition that more affordable housing needs to be added to the contract. This can be achieved by reducing the amount of commercial space by 100,000 square feet, which would yield between 80 and 100 more units. The Durham Committee shares the concerns of the coalition on the heavy reliance on the proposal of city funds, but we believe that city retention of ownership of the land and the potential for additional private capital can reduce that dependence on city financing. Thank you for considering the community's needs for additional affordable housing units, and that the city retain ownership to ensure affordability and accountability in perpetuity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. At this time, I'm going to call the first 5 speakers. I ask that as I call you, if you would line up against the railing to my right, your left, and I'm pleased to welcome Janetta Alston.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Janetta Alston actually pivoted to being online. She's virtual.
Oh, okay. Do you have her? Mm-hmm. All right, very good. Then we'll hear from her now. Ms. Alston, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. Good evening. Thank you for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, good evening, council members. The reason I wanted to speak is because of the situation that I'm sure you all are aware of. I have concern with building or reconstructing 500 East Main Street when we have 100+ citizens right down the road at JFK Towers that are living in squalor. There has been no mention in no meeting that I have heard of what, even though that is a privately owned place, we are citizens. And you're building something new, but no one's taking charge to say to this Millennium Group, you can't do this in our town. I mean, when does that happen? You know, I'm showing up everywhere trying to make everybody aware. This is what's going on with our seniors and our handicapped people living in squalor right down the road. And to build something else without addressing what's already going on makes no sense to me as a citizen. That's what I wanted to bring to your attention this evening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Alston, for being with us. All right, I turn now to our neighbors who are here with us in chamber. Nicole Thompson, Jane Williams, Cynthia Williams, George Smart, Reverend James Blake. If you would. Good evening. If you'll just state your name for us, and you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, council members, City Manager Page, City Attorney Rayburn. My name is Nicole Thompson. I'm the president and CEO of Downtown Durham Incorporated, located at almost forgot, 307 West Main Street, Suite 102. DDI is excited that the redevelopment of 505 West Chapel Hill Street may be moving closer to reality. This site is a pivotal piece of property sitting in a key location in our downtown. As such, you, the council, must treat it as a catalytic and transformative development that it can be. You are in a unique position to ensure that what happens at this location is just the first in a series of redevelopment that continues to fuel downtown Durham's growth and vibrancy. You've heard from a number of organizations already about what they'd like to see on the site: open space, commercial lab space, housing, affordable housing, maintaining the existing building, et cetera. These are all important when considering the overall development and when considering downtown's growth. But I ask you to take a moment and think of the bigger picture and how this redevelopment of 505 West Chapel Hill Street will interact, relate to, inspire, encourage, and push development and growth throughout downtown. With the ability to form a very strategic public-private partnership with the preferred developer, 505 West Chapel Hill Street could become an important impetus to how downtown continues to recover and grow. This site sits adjacent to or in close proximity to a minimum of 5 other private development sites. It is adjacent to the NC Mutual building, the Go Triangle parking lot. It's just 2 blocks from the Gregson. Its back southeast corner is just 2 short blocks from the proposed ATC expansion, and it is just 4 blocks from the Durham ID master development. To develop the 505 West Chapel Hill site in a vacuum would be a disservice to downtown. You must strongly encourage your preferred developer to reach out and discuss and collaborate as appropriate with adjacent property owners. These 5 sites I just mentioned have a total of 30 acres that are in some stage of redevelopment. For downtown's long-term viability, it is essential that these and other developments start working collaboratively on how they support downtown's continued growth and needs. I remind you of the role the city played in the creation of the Durham Bulls Athletic Park, which led to the complete redevelopment and growth of the American Tobacco campus and adjacent property. With 505, the city sits in a similar position, and with an intentional and thoughtful redevelopment plan, encouraging collaboration with other potential redevelopments, the city could lead downtown's next phase of development and growth. We all know that this site sits along West Chapel Hill Street, a busy thoroughfare through downtown. But I ask that you remember that this property also sits between Gregson and Duke, 2 busy, car-dependent, one-way streets that have no real connection to downtown, but rather work to move traffic, vehicular traffic, in and out of downtown as quickly as possible. As you consider the redevelopment of this property, I ask that you consider how the city and NCDOT will work with this development to make Gregson and Duke a more pedestrian-friendly corridor, a corridor that encourages people to walk to, around, and through. Wow, really?
Thank you. It goes quick. Thank you so much for being with us.
Man, I've got a lot. Thank you so much. We look forward to working with the preferred developer.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, council members, for your time and attention. My name is Jane Williams, and I represent the walk-in ministry of First Presbyterian Church. First Presbyterian is a downtown church by choice. We are located a block from the urban ministry of Durham, so we see people in crisis from a wide range of socioeconomic backgrounds. On Mondays and Thursdays of each week, our ministry works with individuals and families who are struggling to pay their rent and utilities. This certainly includes people of low wealth, but the shortage of affordable housing and the lack of increase in earnings to cover these higher housing costs has resulted in our assisting individuals of higher income. For example, last week, I talked with a mother of 2 children who works for Durham Public Schools and is on a 10-month contract. She was behind in her rent and needed assistance before being filed against for eviction. We frequently have employees from Duke who work full-time and struggle to pay their rent because of the lack of affordable housing. Employees often have to live outside of Durham and drive significant distances to their jobs. The need is great, and the 505 property is the city's last opportunity to directly address the housing shortage. There is no magical number for how many affordable units are to be built at 505. If the council goes with the proposal to retain the Milton Small Building and convert it into a hotel, there is a striking contrast. There will be 100 available hotel rooms compared with 92 units of affordable housing on the site. This comparison seems out of balance. Are people visiting Durham more important than people who live and work in Durham? We would urge the council to direct the staff to negotiate a significant increase in the number of affordable units offered, including exploring the possibility of subsidies by the city to cover the increased cost of more units. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Williams. I'm a Durham resident from the 27713 area code. I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Coalition for Affordable Housing and Transit, known less formally as CAT. I want to thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and your fellow council members for the opportunity to speak on the 505 project. Several CAT volunteers and their counterparts from 5 citywide organizations spent multiple hours working with city staff and interested real estate developers to communicate Durham residents' needs for affordable housing at the 505 site. The 505 community group reviewed the People's Corporation RFP submission and shared with city staff, the developer, and available council members its concerns with the current People's proposal. CAT offers its continued support of the process. We only ask that productive negotiations take place to, 1, significantly increase the number of affordable housing units in the final contract, and 2, an agreement be made that the site's acreage be leased rather than sold to the developer. For clarification, CAT agrees the People's Corporation's RFP submission yielded a workable proposal for the city. There are aspects of People's proposal that we believe will make the 505 site a great asset for Durham's future. However, we reserve full support until the completion of the RFP negotiations. We ask council to provide city staff and developer with instructions to address the community's 2 concerns, as I previously stated, before the contract is finally signed. Downtown Durham has few prominent sites left to make a visible statement about our community's commitment to equitable, aesthetically pleasing, affordable housing for all income levels, especially for those low to mid-income residents with the greatest affordability needs. Your guidance for further good faith negotiations to take place will help to achieve the highest feasible number of affordable housing units for our residents. On behalf of CAT, I ask that tonight's council help make the community's hopes for significantly more affordable housing on the 505 site come true. I believe you can make it happen. Finally, I want to affirm CAT's informed actions representing multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-generational, and multi-class concerns about Durham's housing at the 505 site. Please be assured that my voice communicates the voted upon stance of the many organizations in the coalition. I want to especially thank the CAT partners who are here tonight helping, helping ensure that the council knows we are representing many parts of the Durham community whose voices need and want to be heard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for being with us. George Smart. Thank you for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm George Smart. I'm the Executive Director of North Carolina Modernist, 37-year resident of Durham. Our organization is a nonprofit that works to preserve mid-century modern buildings and houses across North Carolina. I was wondering, just to be curious, how many of you in the council have actually been in the building? By show of hands. So some of you. It's gorgeous. It is really an attractive building. You've got cherry and mahogany along the walls. You've got terrazzo floors. You've got floor-to-ceiling windows. You've got great architectural elements that were put in place with the building by Phil Freelon and Patricia Harris when the building was rehabbed a number of years ago. Our organization is here tonight to fully support the current discussion around giving this contract to Peoples and preserving the building. Whatever use that you use it for, it is a prominent place in Durham's history. It is a beautiful building, and we just encourage you to keep saving it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us. Reverend Blake, thank you for being with us, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the City Council. My name is James Blake. I'm the pastor of the Fisher Memorial United Holy Church here in the city of Durham. I also serve on the strategy team of Durham CAN, and I'm a member of the Clergy Caucus. I'm here tonight to publicly remind this body of the promises that have been made relative to affordable housing in the city of Durham. Specifically, I'm here to establish a relationship that promotes accountability of the developers selected for 505 West Chapel Hill Street. We want the council to encourage the developers to maximize the number of affordable units at 505 West Chapel Hill Street. We stand watching and waiting, just as we are doing with Fayette Place. We all are aware that the cost of living, or the cost to live in our city, is continuing to rise, and many who work in our city are unable to afford to live here. There's a great need for affordable housing in our city. This need has resulted in many organizations joining forces to support and petition for more affordable housing. Tonight, there is representation from Durham CAN, the Durham chapter of the NAACP, the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People, People's Alliance, and Duke Memorial Church. We know that any success in providing affordable housing comes from the collaborative effort of organizations within the city who hold not only the city of Durham accountable, but also hold one another accountable to lend its voice to the fight in affordable housing. Durham is a great place to live, and people from other parts of the country and even the world are learning of the greatness of our city. Our responsibility as citizens of Durham is to ensure that Durham is a city for all and not just a destination for the elite. We need affordable housing now and forever, and collectively we can provide affordable housing for current and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to call the next 5 names. Sharon Fosbury, Kathleen Turner, Julianne Patterson, and Mimi Kessler, in that order. If you'll approach the podium, and thank you all so much for being with us this evening. You'll each have 3 minutes. If you'll just state your name, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you for being with us.
Hello, City Council. Good evening. My name is Sharon Fosbury, and I live on Lemongrass Lane in Durham. I'm here on representing the People's Alliance, but also a Durham resident who really, really cares about affordable housing. As you've heard, the need for affordable housing is great, and you, as City Council, have noted that it is great. I just wanted to talk about how, the cost of living has skyrocketed and displaced many people in Durham. Affordable housing is one tool. It's not going to be the panacea of everything, right? But it's a tool that can be used to fight against displacement. Although it's a great tool, many times it is hindered by costly land acquisition, variances, and other things. That's not the case here. You guys, the city owns this land. The city owns this land, and you guys can use it for the true needs that Durham has. Durham needs affordable housing, right? And so you guys, just looking at the zoning, the amount of affordable units that could be created downtown with the height that's permitted, this is a golden opportunity to make a significant contribution to the city's inventory, for the affordable housing inventory in the city. This is a great opportunity for many other people to develop more affordable housing in the community. And we need true affordable housing, 60% AMI or less, not 80%, right? We need more than 1 bedrooms. We need it for families, not for individuals, right? So we need 80%, we need it in perpetuity, we need deed restricted, we need it to be for families, right? That's what's going to keep the people of Durham here, right? Your public servants, your teachers, your workers, your city hall workers, right? They need to be able to raise their families here in Durham. So the People's Alliance and the board has also voted to really urge you to keep ownership of this. This is in the city's hands right now. Please, please use it in the right way. You have control over this, and you can make a real big impact and make a serious decline in the displacements that are happening in the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kathleen Turner. Good evening. Thank you for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Mayor Williams and members of council, my name is Kathleen Turner. I'm the Piedmont Regional Director for Preservation North Carolina. My office is in Durham on 9th Street. Preservation North Carolina strongly supports the City of Durham's selection of the People's Corporation-based development proposal for 505. Their thoughtful proposal not only preserves the historic, iconic home security life insurance building, it presents a comprehensive proposal that meets all the city's stated priorities for the site. Preservation North Carolina is the state's nonprofit leader in historic preservation, dedicated to protecting and promoting buildings, sites, and landscapes important to the diverse heritage of North Carolina. For decades, we've worked with communities in a variety of ways to achieve this mission. We've also been involved in numerous large-scale development projects that involved the production of affordable housing. We've witnessed firsthand how the preservation of historic buildings meets the needs of residents, as well as answers the call to be better stewards of the environment in which we all live, including its citizens. Opened in 1959 as the Office for Home Security Life Insurance Company, this building represents the first Mies van der Rohe-inspired tall office building. Its original design, subsequent renovations are associated with nationally and internationally renowned architects, including our very own North Carolina Milton Small, Pat Harris, and Phil Freeland. However, the 80,000 square foot building is more than an architectural benchmark for the city. Its preservation represents a smart and innovative path forward for the redevelopment of the city's downtown. The People's Corporation-based proposal answers this call by adapting the existing mid-century building into a 100-room hotel that brings vibrancy to the site, creates new jobs, and provides substantial revenue to the city, while also supporting the other components of the project. Utilization of historic tax credits produces a substantial cost savings that can be applied to other components of the development and support that as well. From a site planning standpoint, a hotel in this location makes so much sense. It's right off the freeway, two transportation hubs and walking distance to downtown. Additionally, a hotel use in the existing building would shelter the proposed residential structures on the remaining 3 acres from noisy street traffic, providing an oasis for residents within. The progressive city of Durham is fortunate to have a streamlined and architecturally progressive, authentic landmark designed by North Carolina architect Milton Small in its heart. Preservation North Carolina is pleased to support the People's Corporation-based development proposal, which meets all the city's stated priorities. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. Julianne Patterson. Good evening. Thank you for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Julianne Patterson, I'm the Executive Director of Preservation Durham. Based here in Durham, our offices are in the Chesterfield building. And I'm here once again to express Preservation Durham's enthusiastic support to move forward with the People's Corporation and their base proposal plan that includes the adaptive reuse of the historic home security life, the Milton Small building, into a hotel. I shared my suggestion at the work session to encourage use of the historic tax credits. The state and federal tax credits are available to any income-producing property that's listed on the National Register of Historic Places that completes a certified rehabilitation of a historic structure. For this project, they'd be worth about $5 million, and I cannot stress enough that these credits have played a significant role in the revitalization of many of Durham's tobacco warehouses and historic buildings downtown, including a mid-century modern hotel. But really, buildings are just containers for stories, so I figured I would share a couple stories and touch on the history of the building that was mentioned at the last meeting. So the building served its first and longest life as a corporate headquarters for an insurance company, and that use gives context to the surrounding landscape and the rise of the landmark NC Mutual Tower across the street from it. Which was built in an even more adventurous and modernist style during the civil rights movement to tower over the earlier design of the White Lead Insurance Company. We need both of the buildings to tell that story and to give that context. And we also need the history of the police department to tell the story of how Pat Harris, one of the first Black women licensed to practice architecture in the state of North Carolina, and Phil Freeland, famed designer of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC, were hired by the city of Durham in one of their first public contracts to do the retrofit of that building, converting it from the corporate offices into the police station. Pat Harris is on the board of Preservation Durham, and she's watching tonight, so hi, Pat. But she wanted me to share on her behalf that she believes it took a lot of courage for the 1990 City Council to hire a Black architecture firm to renovate the building of an insurance company that would not write policies for Black people during Jim Crow. She believes that decision was one that led the way for Durham to become the progressive and inclusive city that it is today. So that's just a reminder that history is being made every day, and the stories of our historic buildings are not static. And Durham has a real opportunity with this project to write the next chapter of a dynamic mixed-use redevelopment that combines new and old to serve as a model for preservation for other cities. So I just want to say thank you for prioritizing historic preservation and getting this project where it is today. So thank you.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Mimi Kessler. I live in Durham. I can't be any more eloquent than the people who've spoken before me, so I'm just going to give you the bottom line. Please don't settle. Please get what we need. Please don't settle for something that isn't what we need. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I believe I've exhausted all the cards that have been given to me. Madam Clerk, is anyone else in queue? All right, then I'm going to turn now to my colleagues on the dais for any questions or comments. Councilmember Baker.
I have a question for the developer, the development team. My question is, and is the development team here? Cool. We've heard a little bit about some of the development issues that you've run into in Charlotte. I was wondering if you could give us a little rundown on what exactly happened in Charlotte and how the issues that you ran into in Charlotte might be avoided here in the Durham context.
So we haven't met before. I'm Don Peeble, so I'm the founder and chairman of the company, so I figured I'd take this. First of all, it's good for me to be back in North Carolina. My grandparents are from North Carolina, and my cousin, who's like an uncle to me, chaired the Duke Endowment for many years, and is a triple alumni of Duke, Clarence Newsom. So it's good to be back here in North Carolina, and I'm happy to be here. I run a development company that I founded in 1986 in Washington, D.C. It's considered one of the largest development firms in the United States. We have over $8 billion of projects in our pipeline, have completed nearly $3 billion of development projects around the country. It's the largest African-American owned development company in the United States and has been for a couple decades. We've been Black Enterprise Company of the Year. We have been one of the most influential firms, and one of the things that we have done is set a new standard in Washington, D.C., where this company was founded in terms of economic inclusion before it was discussed and before it was popular, because in 1986, we did over 35% of our contracts with minority and women-owned businesses. And of course, I was taught the real estate business by a Black woman, my mother, who was a real estate broker. So it's a tough business, by the way. And you mentioned Charlotte, North Carolina. So we were selected to develop what was tried by 2 other developers, by the way, and unsuccessfully so, a neighborhood called Brooklyn Village, which was a historically Black community that was vacated for the purpose of urban renewal. And so we won a competition. In fact, one of our competitors in this site bid against us as well, and we were successful. But Charlotte and Mecklenburg County moved too quickly. Were not able to give clear title to the property. So we were selected in 2016, and I believe we got clear title. They got clear title about 2 years ago. We went through an entitlement process and then completed that entitlement process and closed within a matter of months thereafter. So we own the site, and we have done phase 1 and are ongoing with phase 1 right now, which is site work. So I'm trying to figure out what the issue is that you said was an issue with regards to Charlotte. What's the issue that you're concerned about?
Based on some conversations that I've had and things I've been told, articles I've pulled up, there was a delay in the process.
No, there's not a delay in the process, actually. So I don't know what you've been told. So again, we closed when Mecklenburg County was able to get clear title to all the property. The city of Charlotte had rights to the property, and they negotiated, and between the county and the city government, negotiated the terms of them giving up those development rights. And they had a right to repurchase the site. Charlotte did, the city did, from Mecklenburg County. And in order for us to proceed, that right had to be extinguished, and that was a part of the RFP. And they negotiated that between the two governments, resolved that. So what you're probably referring to is a couple newspaper articles. So we have in our contract, like every development agreement does, certain force majeure events. So, you know, labor shortages, financial changes in the economy, things of that nature. Those are force majeure issues. And when they take place, you have to notify the other party in order to have an opportunity to preserve your rights. So in this instance, we are working on the site right now. It has been financed. We have spent millions of dollars getting the parcels ready to build Building 1. However, and we will not be ready to do that until, when is it, October next year? So we anticipate, given the current economy, and the interest rates have tripled since we made our development agreement with them. So, I mean, we signed an agreement, interest rates were essentially zero, and the cost of capital was about 4%. It tripled. And so if rates are as high as they are, then it's going to be difficult to finance Building 1. But we are optimistic on the site, so we spent millions of dollars, paid Mecklenburg County the purchase price in full, and are doing work on the site. And but if things change and interest rates start declining, then we'll proceed as scheduled. But we did notify them of an anticipatory, challenge in the financial markets. That's it.
Thank you. I'll have some comments. I don't have any other questions.
If there are no, you can make your comments now if you like.
Okay, great. So I had to miss the work session, so I just wanted to share some of my priorities on the site. I know that I appreciate Councilmember Cook relaying some of the things that I want to see. Yeah, this is such an important site, as so many speakers spoke to. One reason is because my mother actually used to be the gardener at this site back when I was growing up. I want to see as much permanent, deeply affordable housing as possible, as has been, I think, relayed by everyone up here and so many people in the community. I also want to make sure that even in the market rate units, that there's a maximum allowable rent increase from year to year. I would like to ensure public ownership and public dedication. Of course, the land is already public, but ensuring that any open space, either we retain public ownership of the land, or there's public dedication of the space so that it's not privatized open space. We've heard folks talk about quality urban design. It's a gateway into different parts of downtown. I think that's important. That's iconic. Has great downtown design features. Goes above and beyond our Unified Development Ordinance requirements, wide sidewalks, street trees. The street level activation, making sure that there's permeable frontages on the first floor, that there are small retail spaces and non-residential types of spaces on the first floor so that people are moving in and out and activating the street. We heard a little bit from DDI about the importance of the construction process and engaging with adjacent property owners. I think that's going to be important moving forward as well, is some sort of construction plan that involves engaging with property owners. And then for me, I know that this is something that we had in the RFP, a return of revenue to the city. For me, that's not as important as making sure that we get this right and making sure that's the best possible development that we can get. So those are the comments that I was not able to share at the work session. I want to make sure that I got them out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, Councilmember Ritz, please.
Tim, thank you so much. Yeah, we had a robust discussion at the work session. I appreciate all the comments that were shared there. I'm glad so many folks have come here tonight to share their opinions on this. I believe deeply in the importance of not selling the property and also increasing dramatically the amount of affordable housing on the site. And as we get to the, I think at the appropriate time is later, as we get to the motions, I'd like to offer a substitute motion for motion 3 that's on our agenda. So I just want to let you know that when we get there, I'll happy to offer that motion.
Anyone else? Councilmember.
Thank you. So I don't have any questions. I'm just going to make a statement. I just want to say that I really appreciate the work that has gone into this from the community. I think that y'all hear me say this over and over again, but it's really what makes Durham just an outstanding place to live and also a place to be a representative. The engagement and depth of knowledge and care that everyone brings to pretty much everything we do up here, which is awesome. And I think that we can see from the turnout and from the engagement that this is something that's really important to Durham. This is, as many people have stated, the last really large parcel in downtown that the city owns. And so I just want to echo what I've been hearing from the community, which aligns with what I hear on an everyday basis, right? And I work with people in my city council role who come and are politically engaged, but I also have another role where I work with people who are not politically engaged, who maybe don't have time or the ability to be politically engaged or the privilege to do that. And these values, I think, are pretty consistent among everyone that I have talked to. Now, of course, there's a diversity in terms of who wants the building and who doesn't want the building, and do we want a hotel and all of these things. But I think that the core values of maintaining a large amount of affordable housing and also a vibrant downtown that is for the people who live here, these are consistent values that I hear again and again. And so here's what I'm going to say. I'm not attached to the building, and I know that folks have different feelings on that. Again, I've heard really, really, really intense and extremely personal opinions on both sides of the building. But to me, if the building, and particularly another piece of this, if the lab space is coming in between our priorities, then they don't need to be there. And that's what I'm going to say about that. I like the idea of a hotel. I understand that Durham is growing and we want to have visitors. We want to be a place that is inviting and welcoming. And I understand that several of my colleagues are excited about that prospect. But to me, if we're going to have a limited amount of space and we're going to have just some affordable housing and a hotel and lab space, then we only have a small amount of remaining commercial. And what I want to see is commercial that is serving the people who live there. I don't want to see commercial that is tailored to out-of-town guests. And I think that's the danger that we run into when we have hotel spaces and development that is tied in by a hotel, right? When the hotel becomes like sort of the central focus of that. You heard from downtown Durham folks already today, but y'all, people that live in downtown Durham, they're leaving for all of their stuff, right? There's nothing here. People drive into downtown Durham, they have dinner, and then they leave. There's no pharmacy anymore. There's no grocery store. People can't get their basic needs met here. We have a super amazing opportunity to make Durham, downtown Durham, an actual place where people can live and not only survive, but also thrive in downtown Durham. And I really think that we need to prioritize that. And so I am excited to hear what my colleagues have to say in terms of potentially offering a different motion. I'm interested to hear what the developers are able to come back with. I agree with several of the folks, what they said, that I think that this is a good baseline, but I'm excited to hear how that project echoes back the clear values and priorities of this community. So I'm hoping to see something that really, really works to support what I and I think a lot of other people want to see in downtown Durham. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Did you have anything? Councilmember Caballero. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you all of the members of our community who have come out. think I'm a member of about 95% of the organizations that are part of the coalition. We are at a decision point in this process, and I want to speak to a number of the different currents that are informing this debate and this conversation. Firstly, just from a historical point of view, I think it's worth noting that we are here because the original plan fell through. We would have already been developing this property. So we are here, and we approved something based upon community input, based upon a robust vetting and hearing of a number of constituency groups. We've heard from some of them tonight, our economic folk from DDI, our Preserve Rural Durham folk, our affordable housing folk, which, you know, no secret I have great affinity for. Cut my teeth in public service in Durham with affordable housing. But I want to, there are a couple of things that I think need to be said in this conversation. The first number we had for affordable housing that would have been on that site didn't come from the council. It came from the community. What we have before us now is more than the first ask. And I think that's worth saying. The other thing is that the RFP that we sent out, we have a different, and I understand we have a different council now, and I want to speak plainly to that reality. The RFP that we sent out was based upon a community conversation. Many of the groups here participated in that first conversation that brought us that RFP. And there were a number of things that we wanted to achieve. A significant financial windfall to the city, affordable housing, an activated streetscape, keep the building. All of these things, all of this wish list that was brought to us, we tried to achieve everything, give everybody a piece of what they asked for. And that's what informed the RFP, and that's what these proposals were based upon. So the proposal that we have before us from Peebles, we like it, but it's almost as if we like it, but we want it to behave as another proposal. We have a proposal before us that retains the land and increases affordable housing. So I just want to say to my colleagues, we have a proposal before. I think it's accurate. I don't want to call the name errantly, but there is a proposal that retains ground lease and increases affordable housing. So we like Peebles, but we want it to look like something else, which is fine. I do also want to speak to the facticity of a statement that the only way we control what goes there is if we keep the land, if we keep ownership. Black folk in this country are very familiar with the ability to retain your values on a piece of land and still sell it. They were called restrictive covenants. Think of a restrictive covenant with morality. We can sell this land with terms. And if a developer agrees to those terms, then those terms are legally binding. They don't get to just down the road say, okay, we're going to flip it for something else. And the way we were going to meet one of our requirements for a significant financial windfall was to sell it, there's no better way to put it, with a restrictive covenant on it. That is, you have to use it for affordable housing. And then when you if you sell it down the road, the city gets a stake in that. That's how we were going to meet the requirement of a financial windfall for the city. And if we tweak that, which we can, I'm not saying I'm against it, if we tweak that, that changes the numbers. That changes the calculus. One of the propositions that were on the table when we first started talking about this was we can retain the land and develop it ourselves. And I think it was Councilmember Johnson who said, we don't want the city in development. We do not want to enter that bill. I mean, we could retain the land and just do all affordable housing. I mean, that's an option to us. But if we want affordable housing and economic empowerment and a financial stake, then at some point we're going to have to, you know, one of the best definitions of leadership is a Latin word meaning sometimes you have to piss your friends off. Everybody will be happy, no one will be ecstatic. If we want to keep the building, if we want affordable housing, if we want to make money, if we want it activated, then we're going to have to make some hard choices where everybody gets a piece of what they want and not everything. if we want to go back to the drawing board and make it an affordable housing totally, we can do that. That's within our power. But I just want to say to my colleagues that saying Peebles, bring us this with more of this, fundamentally changes the math on this and fundamentally changes the numbers. And this was based upon an RFP that we've done already. I'm not saying that we have to go all the way back to the beginning, and the language that, and I don't know what substitute motion my colleague plans on bringing. I don't know if there have been subsequent conversations, but the purpose of a work session, we had a full vetting of this at the work session. Staff presented us with language. I polled the House, and we were all in agreement then. So we haven't had another meeting since that work session, so I don't know what subsequently has occurred between that work session and now, but we held a work session public in good faith. We went around the table. We were there for a good while, and the staff read back to us the language, which included the things that we wanted the staff to do, namely, come back with the potentiality of a ground lease and more affordable units. And that was captured. That was captured. So, and I want to maintain fidelity with the public, robust conversation that we had at our work session, which is where these things happen. So if we, I'll put a pin on it here. I mean, we have motions before us. The motions capture what we asked the staff to do. This motion is not to start moving dirt tomorrow. This motion is to go back and bring us what it looks like to keep the land and what it looks like to increase units. Anything other than that at this point is I think, I just don't think it would be wise for us as a council to do anything other than that before we get the numbers. This may ultimately be an affordable housing, and I'm listening to I'm reading the lay of the land and listening to the conversation from my colleagues. This may very well be an affordable housing project downtown, and that's within our purview. But where we are tonight is where we said we would be at our work session, and we communicated that and put that out in public, translated that to the public. And I think these motions adequately give us the runway to get the information we need. We're not deciding tonight to break ground. We're deciding tonight, as was the will of this council, to move forward with Peebles and to empower them to come back and bring us back what we've asked for. So let's let them bring us back what we've asked for, which we captured at the work session, and then move forward from there. That's my recommendation. So, colleagues, anyone else? Councilmember Riss.
Appreciate your comments. I will say we had a wide-ranging discussion at the work session. My recollection was at the end of the discussion, we all said, what did we really decide here? So I think we had a lot of conversation. I think we instructed the staff to work with the development team to come back with a revised motion that would reflect the concerns we shared on Thursday at the work session about the ground lease versus selling the property and about more affordable housing. So what's come back in the motion, and I'll offer the substitute when we get there, but I think the language, certainly, as you say, we're authorizing the manager to negotiate a non-binding term sheet, right? The language is pretty squishy about the consideration of a potentiality. My amendment is going to make that much more direct, and I'll offer that at the time. But I want to make clear that I think when we left there, I'm not sure there was clear. I don't think we voted on the language that's in that third motion. So
thank you, Councilmember Ritz. And I appreciate that. The mayor, well, the language is not squishy. We had a robust conversation. The staff did an excellent job in capturing what we said. It's archived. We can go back and watch the meeting, what was said. The language I see before me says to authorize the city manager to negotiate a non-binding term sheet, we're not moving dirt, outlining the terms of a development agreement and other required transactional documents with TPC 505 WCH LLC for the base scenario request for proposal submission as necessary for the redevelopment of 505 West Chapel Hill Street with consideration of the potentiality of a ground lease structure and affordable units. That is precisely what we asked for, and that is precisely the language that is in this this motion. I think the staff did an excellent job in capturing what we said as a council, and there's no squishiness here. This is what we said at the work session. I was there. All right, Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, when are you ready to accept language for a motion?
I appreciate that. When I'm ready, I will. Thank you. All right, colleagues, we have several motions before us on item number 7. Motion 1 is to approve the recommendation of the People's Corporation doing business as TPC 505 West Chapel Hill, LLC, as the preferred development team. I'll receive a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
All right, you've heard the motion and the second. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote? Please close the vote and report out.
The motion passes unanimously.
Second motion, to authorize the city manager to negotiate a non-binding term sheet outlining the terms of a development agreement and other required transactional documents with TPC 505 West Chapel Hill, LLC, for the base scenario request for proposal submission as necessary for the redevelopment of 505 West Chapel Hill Street, with consideration of the potentiality of a ground lease structure and additional affordable units.
Here, I'd like to offer my substitute motion, if I may.
Well, first of all, we need to get a motion and a secondary motion, and then in the discussion, you can offer your substitute motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
May I offer now? So I'd like to move a slightly modified motion to read as the following. To authorize the city manager to negotiate a non-binding term sheet outlining the terms of a development agreement and other required transactional documents with TPC 505 WCH LLC for the base scenario request for proposals for the base scenario request for proposal submission as necessary for the redevelopment of 505 West Chapel Hill Street with a ground lease and consideration of additional affordable units or an annual cap on rent increases not to exceed 6%.
Discussion?
Can we hear from the city attorney on, I guess, just making sure that that language makes sense?
I mean, the language is for the policymakers to consider. It's an alternative motion. It's an amended motion.
Councilmember Caballero?
This is, you'd ask for discussion at this point.
Discussion.
Okay, yeah. So I'm comfortable with this motion. I think it gives the flexibility to the developer around the affordable units. There had been conversation around the rent capping. We're not dictating the amount of units. We're not saying you need to deliver X, there had been conversations around, there needs to be, 120, I think a number was thrown around. And so it does let the development team figure out at the end of the day, we need affordability, whether that means 60% AMI or your rent's capped. To me, it doesn't matter. And so then the math goes to you all to figure out. And we're not dictating to y'all the particulars of it. We trust your expertise and your professionalism and the way you do business to come back with us with some options. I certainly wasn't comfortable being too strict around that language because there has to be some flexibility within that for the development team, otherwise it's going to fail. So that is where I am at. I think I was really clear at the work session about retaining of land. Here's the thing, if this development fails for whatever reason, it's not going to, but things happen. I mean, we're here because a previous one failed. And for whatever reason we do not retain the rights to that land anymore, then we have gotten absolutely nothing as a city. And I know as an elected leader, quite frankly, I couldn't look y'all in the face if that were to happen. So that is, for me, a really particular sticking point, is that if a development deal doesn't happen, we all know how sticky development has been these last few years between construction costs and everything else. Again, to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, we're here because a previous development deal failed. And so I need to know that I'm making good for residents and voters of the city. And while there are other publicly owned properties between the city and the county and the schools, there's several of them. I do want to thank DDI Nicole Thompson sent her comments that were cut, and she made that point in her email to us, and that's true. There are other parcels of land that are publicly held. I don't think that we have 5.5 acres, at least continuous like this, elsewhere in the downtown core left, and so it is important. I do also just want to highlight, and I'm trusting you all, right? I think that the fact that you have a good reputation, I think that you were the folks who delivered an RFP project that clearly showed connectivity to our community, that clearly showed you understood the history of Durham. I think it's going to be an excellent project, but I do need to know that we retain the rights of ownership, and that we fought as hard as we could on the affordability piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember.
And I want to say that I agree with most of what my colleague has stated, particularly in terms of ownership of the land. I think that there, of course, are other methods of transferring land and rights in land, and we heard earlier about restrictive covenants, but those are things that require the seller to look into the future and make decisions. And as we know, because we've seen a global pandemic in the last 5 years change the way we think about everything. It's extremely hard to imagine contingencies for every outcome. So for me, the land ownership also feels super vital. And then I was wondering, Councilmember, if you could just read the last section one more time, because I think I had a comment on it, but I couldn't quite remember the language.
Yeah, so the last clause was, let's see, so it was, required transactional documents with TPC, 505 WCH, LLC for the base scenario, request for proposal submission as necessary for, let me get up here, the redevelopment of 505 West Chapel Hill Street with a ground lease and consideration of additional affordable units or an annual cap on rent increases not to exceed 6%.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so I understand the need to be flexible in some of the things. For me, I would like to see it be a substantial number of affordable housing, or a substantial number more affordable housing, or the cap of, I think you said 6%. And the reason I'm thinking about that is because that has been the number one thing that we've heard from all of our community members. We sit up here and talk about affordable housing as a priority on this council all the time. Y'all know that it's my biggest priority, and that I've literally spent all of my days working on that all the time. But also, that was the number one priority listed on the RFP. So I think that that is the thing that has been the consistent through line from the inception of this third iteration all the way until this new council today. So that would be my request if it was a friendly amendment.
Are you suggesting to amend the amendment?
Well, actually, I did have a question about that, because this is an amendment that was, or a motion that was brought by staff, so I'm not sure who declares it to be friendly or not, but I was asking that the substitute proposal have an amendment, yes.
So to Councilmember, you want to add an amendment to you want to further amend Councilmember Ritz's amendment, is that?
I said the addition of one word, yes.
All right, let me establish some framework from a parliamentary point of view. We have a motion, a live motion, and we have a substitute motion. We are now in discussion. So before we amend your amendment, and this is what work sessions are for, amend your amendment, we're going to, did you have another?
I just had a parliamentarian question around that.
What, you have point of order?
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. I just was asking, my understanding would be that we would have to vote on it, and then I don't think we can amend an amendment, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you for that clarification. That's fine.
We'll get to the parliamentary nuances, but I do want to, just since we're in the discussion part now, we've just voted to designate preferred status to a particular developer. And now we're considering a substantive change to now, instead of saying what we agreed upon at the work session, consideration of the potentiality of a ground lease structure, we are saying we want it to be a ground lease. That's the proposal. But we've chosen a preferred developer already. If we're going to say that this must now be a ground lease, why would I lock myself in as a decision maker to one developer without seeing what others might do? To me, that because somebody might bring us back a better deal. I mean, I'm going to prefer one developer, but then substantively change the terms of the agreement when we've got another developer, Conifer, offered us a 65-year land lease agreement with more affordable housing units. Why didn't we just take their agreement? It's kind of like, again, as I said earlier, we want Peebles to behave as someone else rather than just choose the someone else. This motion, and again, colleagues, and I want to be very transparent and just very forthright and not bite my tongue at all. Clearly, some of y'all have been talking since our work session. And that's clear because we had an opportunity to vet all of this. And to ask us to, contrary to what we said at the work session, which is a public meeting, to now dictate that it's going to be a land lease, when we're not binding, we can let them bring back the numbers. We may not like the numbers, and we still have the opportunity to tweak it or change it. I understand constituents. I understand wanting to be responsive to the folk who we feel beholden to. I'm beholden to a lot of people in this city. But we are now at a decision point where fiduciaries of this city, and we're in these chairs to make some tough decisions. The tough decision before us now is choosing a developer who will most effectively capture our values. And affordable housing was, listen, full disclosure, it's my cheap value, but there were other values. The preserved folk had values. Our economic friends had values. Our other community stakeholders had values as well. And I just want to be very careful that we, first off, when we transmit something to the public in an open meeting, that we keep fidelity with that. Secondly, and I say this respectfully to you as decision makers, to choose a preferred developer and then, if I were Conifer, I'd be pissed because we're essentially saying we prefer a developer, but we want you to do what somebody else already presented. And to me, as a decision maker, I just don't think that's a road we want to go down in terms of our appearing effective and judicious to the folk who put us in these seats. Colleagues, I believe this motion that our staff worked on, that we said we agreed with at the work session, gives us enough flexibility and agility to do what we need to do. We're not moving any dirt tonight. All we are saying is what we said at the work session, go back, bring us what this looks like. I think that for tonight, for a council with no numbers before us, to say it's definitely going to be a ground lease, when our legal staff can come up with all kinds of ways for us to, even if we sell it, to still retain our values. It happens all the time. Municipalities do it all over the country. Folk do it all the time, sell it with terms. And our legal staff is the best in the business in the state of North Carolina. They will protect us. To do anything other than that tonight, to me, I'm not interested in virtue signaling. I'm not interested in, yeah, well, I'll just leave it at that. To do anything other than that, I think would be borderline irresponsible without numbers in front of us. This staff has given us a way to get what we need to make an informed decision. And I'm comfortable with what we communicated at the work session. So I'm supporting the motion as is. Councilmember Caballero. Oh, Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I really appreciate Mayor Pro Tem spelling out kind of what it looks like to go through 3 different processes and to be 3 different or 4 different councils at this point. What I will say, I will add to that in that I think what for me this evening, what drastically shifts from the work session conversation is that this is a public hearing and that there have been a lot of public comments shared that align with what Councilmember Riss stated in his substitute motion. But I'll also add, it's also the conversation that Mr. Peoples brings and exactly what happened in Charlotte. And so to your point about the, restrictive covenants, those can be removed. What can't be removed is the ownership. And so if there is a way to complete this project with a ground lease, I would like to see what that possibility looks like. And I think it's a great idea to at least acknowledging that there have been troubles in the financial market, to at least allow the developer to move forward and to include some of those things, acknowledging the shift in Charlotte. And so just from that two very specific positions, I can hear the conversation around, and I'm trying to catch it, the substantial housing or the housing, you have to say that last part again.
Yeah, with the ground lease and consideration of additional affordable units or an annual cap on rent increases not to exceed 6%.
And I think to that point, the piece where you're saying additional affordable units, being flexible around that, I think is probably where I have a little bit of angst, because I do think that there are numbers that have been floating around, and we're very well aware here in Durham that we're very engaged and that folks have ideas in their head, and they usually circulate amongst each other, and they've been shared publicly. And so I've heard the number 225. I haven't heard it come forward today, but I do want to make sure that the developer is aware that there are numbers, and the more community engagement that you do, the more likely you are to have more community support, which is why in the work session I kept stating that this is likely to come back before us a number of more times. I don't want to keep seeing it change, because what I'm very clear on is that I am still waiting around the corner from Fayetteville Street for it to be developed, and we are yet in another iteration of it, and that has produced 0 affordable units. And so when we talk about affordable housing, I am at my wit's end on the lack of housing that is actually being developed. I think Willard Street is the last of it that we've been able to get done, and I would like to see us get more done. So that's where I am. I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem's comments. I do think that, to his point, making the changes on the fly is never what you want to do, but here we are tonight, post-pandemic, post-Charlotte situation, and acknowledging that finances aren't always as clear as it can be. With the murkiness around it, I think we're giving you a little bit more guidance. As a new council, there are new members, and they have some ideas. And so rent caps, land lease, ground lease, however it looks, it's better to have more information up front, even though it's post the RFP. I want this process to continue. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. This isn't a public hearing. This is a general business item that is subsequent to a work session per regular order, work session that would have been on consent, but it was placed on general business. It's not a public hearing.
I appreciate that correction.
Absolutely.
And just noting that there were public comments shared in the general business item.
No doubt. Yeah, there were public comments. Yeah, I acknowledge. I heard them. There were public comments, and in deference to those public comments, for example, the 6%, I don't know the math or science behind that number. Maybe it might need to be higher than 6%. I mean, where did that number come from? I don't know the calculus or the equation that came up with that number. Why don't we let our professional staff do what we pay them to do and bring us back numbers so we can make an informed decision? I have no idea where that number, I don't know if that number is high. It might need to be 9% or 8%. And without doing the due diligence, at a Monday night where we're voting on motions that were crafted during our work session to just on the back of an envelope write down numbers, I just don't understand why we would do that when we could be shorting ourselves. I think this motion gives us enough leeway to get in. We're not breaking any dirt. We're not writing checks tonight. We're asking our staff to go back and bring us more information. And everything we're doing now, we can do again in an informed, intelligent way with numbers before us. I understand wanting to honor what our constituents, I'm part of these constituencies too, but this is leadership now. This is decision making. And you know, you got to get used to some folk being unhappy with you sometime, and we'll still be friends. But I cannot support, after what we've done at the work session in public, just on the fly, substituting variables, inserting numbers as policymakers with no science or no math in front of us, when we've got, you know, enough leeway to do what we need to do in an informed way. Councilman Freeman, then I'll come back to the end of the podium.
Thank you. I did just want to offer, hearing your angst about the numbers, that it is actually a statement from the President of the United States around developing rent caps that can highlight some of this 5% conversation around the rent cap. So it's not just a number out of thin air. I do want to say that that came out in July. I know it's newer. It hasn't been vetted or tried in many other cities or towns, but I do think it's something we could do here that does demonstrate what a cap, how we can work with developers in a public-private way to make sure that the caps are in place to prevent people from losing their housing. And I'm just offering that because I hear your angst, I understand it, and I just wanted to make sure you're.
Thank you. I'm not familiar with the President's comments saying 6%, but Councilmember, I think, Councilmember, did you have your hand up? Okay, Councilmember Caballero, and then we're gonna.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight that the motion says "or" with the rent capping, and I think the reason we are interested in that is for flexibility for the developer. I think that is it's not "and." There was a nuance to choosing the conjunction we chose. I think it comes to the development team to show us your work. I mean, that's essentially what it is, and the bar is set high in Durham. I think I understand the Mayor Pro Tem's angst. I've said it during the work session. There were many of us, at least I was not super pleased with the way that the RFP conversation went down. I felt that, and I am the council member who said, actually, the city should just develop this. So I know Councilmember Johnson at the time and I were not on the same page. I just want to highlight that there's a reason why we chose, there's an or and not an and I think it does provide flexibility for the development team. I think the rent capping idea, often you'll see a 3 or 4% on a rental property if you're trying to accrue passive income. That's a pretty standard thing that a landlord will do on a lease just year over year, regardless of what they're doing or how they're improving their property. They will just include it. And so that is kind of what happens a lot of times with investment properties, and what's been happening across the United States is that you're seeing 8, 10 plus % increases for no reason. It's not because that building got a new roof. It's not because there's a new HVAC system. It's because somebody put some paint on a building and decided to up your rent. Your income hasn't increased, especially if you're on a fixed income as a senior. And so we do actually have to have these conversations. And certainly I think, at least my trust in this developer is this is going to be a collaborative process. This is going to be a process where we work together, because that is what was stated to us by the developer at the work session. Thank you.
Councilmember Baker.
Got a question for staff. First of all, I'm comfortable with the goalpost that has been proposed here tonight with the amended motion. To staff, I just wonder if you could tell us what is the next decision-making point for the council, and what are the steps? We vote on this tonight. What are the next steps that follow this? What's sort of the general timeline? Could you explain that to us and to the public?
Sure. Stacy Poston, General Services Department. So what we would do if the motion passes this evening is we would begin to enter into negotiations with the preferred development team and attempt to draft a term sheet, development agreement, whatever documents were necessary based on the framework of the deal, and include those elements. And we would then come back to council for concurrence and recommendation to advance. So generally, we would need to have a discussion with the preferred development team to determine what the negotiation term might look like. And so we would be able to sort of have that conversation and then come back to council with those documents for your consideration.
And what would be the decision-making point for council?
Right, so you would make a decision on whether to accept the terms that were in the development agreement, and have discussion about those documents to determine if they had fidelity with the intent of council's direction this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think it's worth noting that if we're going to substitute every variable and define the terms, then there's nothing for us to consider. What they're going to bring back is what we tell them to bring back. If we say 6%, they're going to bring back 6%. If we say ground lease, they're going to bring back ground lease, and whatever those numbers are, we've already told them you're our preferred developer, notwithstanding if there's another developer that might do better. And we're here in the public saying that we prefer you. So the motion as it's stated now from the staff allows us to do everything that we've been saying for the last hour and still be in a position to look at the numbers, look at the terms, and make an informed decision on behalf of the people of this city, rather than us substituting variables just to be substituting them. So I would say that, to your point, Councilmember Baker, that what they will bring, if we close the door on the research and say this is the number and this is what we want, then we're not going to be surprised by what they bring back, because we, as the final arbiters of this city's business, they're going to do what we tell them to do. So, what else?
Mayor Pro Tem, I want to echo Councilmember Caballero's comments. We're simply providing a little bit extra direct guidance to staff as they have these negotiations. We understand that that means a negotiation with the development team to figure out what's possible given these more explicit directions. That's all we're doing here. So I'd love to call for the vote. I think we've got some clear language. We said either more affordable housing or the rent cap idea. We want ideas, more affordability, as we heard here tonight, and that's what the motion will do. Thank you.
Thank you. But I'm going to do justice to your substitute motion, because now you use either or language. We are now at the point of a motion, so I need a clear motion. So if you would, because we've had some discussion about amending the amendment, and either or in the motion and kind of a menu of items, we are now, as a council, getting ready to engage in a legal act of casting a vote. I need a clear motion. So if you would for us.
I think I've offered that.
I'm asked, well, and I'm telling you, subsequent to your offering, we've had a whole bunch of discussion. So for the sake of the record, if you would restate.
Restate the entire motion, yeah, okay. To authorize the city manager to negotiate a non-binding term sheet outlining the terms of a development agreement and other required transactional documents with TPC 505 WCH LLC for the base scenario request for proposal submission as necessary for the redevelopment of 505 West Chapel Hill Street with a ground lease and consideration of additional affordable units or an annual cap on rent increases not to exceed 6%.
Motion to substitute as read.
Hold on a second. That's your motion. Is there a second for that motion?
I just made the motion, but.
There's a motion. Is there a second for that motion?
I'm sorry, I thought that you were just reading the text. Were you making the motion?
That's my motion.
Okay, second.
Sorry? Are you seconding that?
I did second the motion.
Okay. We're going to vote on the substitute motion. If that motion fails, then we vote on the first motion. If this motion passes, then we don't vote on the motion as stated. All right, you've heard the motion. It's been seconded. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote? Please close the vote and report out.
And the motion passes 5-1 with Mayor Pro Tem Middleton voting no.
Do we need to do the? Okay, all right. All right, the next motion is to adopt an ordinance amending the General Capital Improvement Project Ordinance fiscal year 2024 to 25 as amended, the same being ordinance number 16338.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote? Please close the vote and report out.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Final motion to authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a contract for consulting services for the disposition and redevelopment of 505 West Chapel Hill Street between the City of Durham and HRNA Advisors, Inc., in an amount not to exceed $250,000.
Moved.
Second.
Discussion. Staff, I have a question. With respect to, have we just decreased the level of work they need to do? And do we need to spend this $250,000?
I would not say that we have decreased the amount of work that we need to do. I think that we are going to need to as a part of the negotiations, as we enter into discussions with the development firm and they provide financial pro formas and alternate scenarios to us, we are going to need to formulate and run models based on the varying array of options that are in these motions. And so we are going to need to have some discussion with our consulting firm about what it's going to take to be able to achieve those things.
Okay. All right, the motion has been read. Did anybody? It was moved. Okay, it's a discussion, yes. All right, Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote? Please close the vote and report out.
And the motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. I believe that disposes of item number 7. Thank you all so much from the community for coming out and for being patient with us tonight, for your input. Thank you, colleagues, for a great discussion.
Mayor Pro Tem, I would just like to raise my amendment as well.
We've already...
Yes, we had to dispose of it by vote before I was able to amend it, and we've disposed of it, so I'm going to reopen my amendment.
Well, he
did a substitute under 2710K.
Motion number, hold on a second. When Councilmember Rist read his motion, that was the motion you read in full. You weren't accepting any friendly amendments to it. I asked you to restate your motion. It was seconded. That motion carried. So what is it that you're trying to amend?
Yeah, so I'm just reading the substitute language, and it says that a substitute motion may be offered, but no further substitute motion may be made until the last offering substitute has been disposed of by vote, and it's the same for an amendment. So my reading of that is that we have to dispose of it by vote, which is exactly what Councilmember Caballero stated to me when I was talking about the extra language. We've disposed of it by the vote, and so now I'm raising that as an amendment to add the word substantial, or substantially, I can't remember the exact wording, before the affordable housing.
Okay, I thought you were offering a friendly amendment to his, stand by for a second.
I want to add the word substantial, additional,
Substantial additional.
yes. Additional, yes. Substantial additional, yes.
Okay.
I'd like the addition to be substantial. I'd like that language to be in there.
So essentially, the motion as it reads, but just with the addition of substantial before additional.
That's correct.
All right, the motion is to authorize the city manager to negotiate a non-binding, well, this is the old, I don't have the, Madam Attorney, would you read the substitute? Did we capture the substitute motion? And if you would read that, and with the addition of substantial before additional.
Okay. It would be to authorize the city manager to negotiate a non-binding term sheet outlining the terms of a development agreement and other required transactional documents with TPC 505 WCH LLC for the base scenario request for a proposal submission as necessary for the redevelopment of 505 West Chapel Hill Street with a ground lease in consideration for substantial additional affordable units or an annual cap on rent increases not to exceed 6%.
Okay, is there a motion for it as read? Well, I'll take Councilmember Cook as offering the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, I hear a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote? I think, is anybody else having issues with it? All right, well, there it is. Open the vote. Please close the vote and report out.
And the motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. I think that is the final disposal of item number 7. Thank you so much, members of the public, for being with us tonight and for your patience. Thank you, colleagues. Okay. Colleagues, we'll suspend for a minute while our neighbors exit the chamber. Yeah, we're gonna have to look at that. All right, colleagues, we're going to go start our general business agenda public hearings. We're just shy of 9 p.m. We'll get started. The first one is item number 17, Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment Omnibus 19, TC 2400001. This is a public hearing, and we'll hear from the staff. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Robin Schultz with the Planning Department, and I'm happy to be here with all of you tonight. Before I begin, staff would like to state for the record that all Planning Department hearing items have been advertised and noticed in accordance with state and local law, and affidavits of all of those notices are on file in the Planning Department. I'm here to present to you all tonight on TC 2400001, which is Omnibus 19. That is a staff-initiated amendment to the UDO. As a reminder, an omnibus consists of minor technical revisions to the ordinance and not larger policy initiatives. For Omnibus 19, these changes can be roughly divided into 3 categories. The first being bringing the UDO into compliance with state legislation, correcting minor incongruencies after the passage of SCAD, and fixing other minor inconsistencies within the text. So just to go through those a bit, for SCAD corrections, we removed all mentions of required parking, clarified that exceeding 20 ADUs requires a site plan, and ensured that all height calculations matched the new ordinance language. We also corrected density requirements in the CN zoning districts and clarified that SCAD did not remove the requirement for project boundary buffers when a site is mass graded. As far as state legislation, we enacted 3 changes. The first of which being that we have updated public notification requirements for street renamings, removed design requirements for anything included within the residential building code, which now includes tri and quadplexes. And lastly, we removed any ordinance which conflicted with NCDEQ's purview. So this is a non-exhaustive list of all the changes made throughout Omnibus 19, which makes changes to 11 articles within the UDO in total. We also included 2 clarifying additions within the definition of affordable housing at the request of the JCCPC. Namely, the first being that AMI averaging is permissible, and that housing choice vouchers are able to be utilized for those units. Lastly, we made 2 changes to the grading setback section after meeting with Habitat for Humanity. The first being that we clarified that street frontages for sites that aren't being mass graded shall not be included within the grading setbacks, and additionally allowed for grading within the setback for positive drainage away from building foundations. Thank you, and planning staff are available for any questions.
Thank you so much. I'm going to declare this public hearing open. Before I go to neighbors in the gallery, I'm going to turn to my honorable colleagues, see if there are any questions pertaining to this particular case for staff. All right, seeing none, I have a few folk who want to speak first. I see her. Firstly, online, we have Donna Stainback. Madam Clerk, if you would make Donna available to us. Ms. Steinbeck, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name's Donna Steinbeck. I live at 4825 Jimmy Rogers Road in Durham, North Carolina. I have a few general questions. I'm looking at section 8.7.2, and in 1A, it reads that the on-site ground absorption system shall be permitted by the state of North Carolina as applicable. I'm not used to seeing as applicable in legal ordinances without as applicable being spelled out. And so it leaves it either non-applicable or applicable depending on what the cases are. So that was, remember, I'm a mathematician. It's black or white. So look at all, those things. I'm also looking at 7.9.1 on the standards is the grading necessary to accommodate positive drainage, and that, the purpose shall be allowed to encroach 2 feet into any required grading setback. Okay. Does that mean that those setbacks have to be on that property? Or does that mean that the runoff can go onto another property? I'll leave that as a question. And I appreciate the fact about the buffers being straightened out. That did answer one of my questions there, and the boundaries. And is it my understanding that all of the wording about changing the parking has been removed, or does that mean that my concern about 10.2.5 and reducing parking spaces is valid, in that we're getting to be an older population, and a lot of people are coming to Durham to retire and may not be as mobile as others, be it, how do you say, due to disabled problems or whatever. So I'm very concerned about parking spaces and removal of those, especially as they apply to ADA rules, and the fact of having enough there that people that are handicapped can use.
Ms. Steinbeck, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Unfortunately, your time has expired. Friends, we're right at the 9 p.m. hour. We're going to take a break until 9:10, and we'll be back in session. And you until here. That's right. Hold on to it.
Owning a home provides a sense of financial stability, family, community, and pride. But housing prices are now higher than ever, making it hard for many Durham residents to afford their first home. That's why the City of Durham is offering the Down Payment Assistance Program to support eligible individuals with up to $80,000 in 0% interest forgivable loans to purchase a house within the city limits. Visit this site or call to find out if you qualify for the program.
Everyone in Durham should be able to find a home they can afford. That's why Forever Home Durham is creating affordable, livable, and inclusive communities for low to middle income residents. From renting to owning, find out how the city is helping more people find homes right here in Durham. Learn more at foreverhomedurham.com.
don't, that's a.
Okay, friends, it's 9:10. We're going to get back to it. We are still on item number 17, Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, Omnibus 19. We've heard from our neighbors online. I'm now turning to those in chamber with us. I'd like to welcome Sherry Zane Rosenthal and Mimi Kessler in that order. You can't hear me? Not my fault. Turn the mics up. 1, 2, 1, 2. Yes, I got a green light. Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me now? You can't hear me? Are y'all messing with me?
I can hear you, but I can't hear you through the mic.
Check, check. It's on.
Check, check.
Check, check. Check.
None of our mics are on.
I see. Check, check.
There you go.
Yeah.
We have ignition.
There you go. We are on item number 17. We're going to turn to our friends and neighbors in chamber. Sherry Zane Rosenthal, good evening. Thank you for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Hi there. My name's Sherry Zan Rosenthal. And, you know, omnibus text amendments are said by planning staff to be cleanup provisions to correct mistakes and inconsistencies, not to make substantive changes. But I believe that some of these accessory structure and accessory dwelling unit provisions of this omnibus inappropriately make substantive changes to the code. And in particular, I would really request that you remove provision 5.4.2 sub 1B6. And what it says is that it would allow subdivision development of up to 20 homes without any site plan review where they're characterized as ADUs, of course, which can be up to 1,200 square foot now, which is enough for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And I want to point out that one site that qualifies for this kind of intense development is the old Club Boulevard School that's across from the Walltown Rec Center, and it's owned by Jim Anthony, who you may remember as the Raleigh developer who paid for the SCAD amendments and who's a board member for the conservative John Locke Foundation. There is a church that rents on Sundays the auditorium of that old school, and that would be enough to allow him to use that so-called place of worship provision, which I think is unconstitutional, and it also is unconstitutionally vague as written, I think. But with this provision, you could all of a sudden have a 20-unit subdivision right there with no site plan review. For example, there are very old water and sewer lines for that site, and you wouldn't have the kind of review that other development of that size would get in order to determine where the stormwater goes, whether the services are sufficient to serve it. This is dense infill in an old section of the city, and we should be more conscious about how we do that kind of thing. And to continue making piecemeal changes to our code through the omnibus text amendments is, I think, to continue toward deregulating residential development and flies in the face of the comprehensive plan and our process to completely rewrite the code. I think we should be doing this comprehensively and not through these omnibus text amendments. Finally, I want to protest the changes to the neighborhood overlay districts of Lakewood and Old West. The point of these overlay districts themselves is to vary from the overall development ordinance. And so why, since the point is that they get a variance from the overall development for different rules that were developed after a lot of negotiation with the neighborhood and developers that work in those neighborhoods, why then would passage of the SCAD amendment mean that you need to make it
Attorney Rosenthal, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Mimi Kessler? Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Mimi Kessler. I live in Durham. There are a number of problems with this ominous text amendment group. Page 3, 4.6.6C2B, removing all references to height of the primary and secondary structures, leaving only square footage. This means the ADU could be taller than the primary dwelling. This was a provision in SCAD that I thought was not adopted. So if that's true, why is it here? It seems like a policy change and not a clarification. Then on page 8, 5.41B6 removes the defined location of an ADU, which means it can be in front of the primary unit. On page 9, 5.4.2B1B6 increases the number of ADUs that can be developed in civic uses, which Ms. Rosenthal just spoke to, from 10 to 20. And I just want to say that there are some unintended consequences that could come up. Can you show my slide? Here. Okay, so on the left is are 2 different houses, small houses. There were 3 being developed on one piece of land, and there was no restraint of the stormwater, which caused harm to the other existing neighbor, her foundation and so forth. And there needs to be a provision that prevents this from happening to adjacent properties. Then they also took out, on page 12, they also took out all mention of where the front entrance of a dwelling is. And so why do we want to have side and back of houses on the street? I just don't understand that. And also in that section, newly named C, garages and access, it references North Carolina Residential Building Code. As I understand it, there are many aspects of the state building code that we articulate in the UDO, which I have been told are there only because it is state law. So I don't understand why this particular reference to state code is so generic. I have no idea where to start. So I object to these changes. They are primarily to make development easier. They provide no assurance that any given residence would be a welcomed addition to any neighborhood. We want to change the density of Durham, not the look and feel of every neighborhood, by building random buildings in any old way. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. This is a public hearing. I've exhausted all of the cards I have. Is there anyone else in the chamber who would like to be heard on this matter? All right, with that, this is staff initiated. So staff, do you want to respond to anything that you've heard tonight?
I'll just say that.
I'm sorry, did you? Okay, go ahead.
I'll just say that ADUs still cannot be constructed in front of the structure. The changes to that language reflect SCAD, which stated that instead of being restricted to going behind the rear building line, accessory structures are allowed beyond the front building line. And so since an ADU by definition is an accessory structure, we have all of that language matching now. And as far as height goes, they still have to be subordinate to the primary structure in terms of height. That's what it says.
We don't yell out from the gallery, please. Continue, please.
And then as far as the entrances, that was reflecting the change in building code. That is a design requirement that we were instituting. And since those zoning districts allowed for quadplexes, triplexes, et cetera, and those now fall under the residential building code, we can't institute those design requirements due to state law.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, questions or comments? Councilmember Cook, please.
I just have a couple of clarifying questions. I am reading the height one, and I'm
541A.
Yeah, I'm just not sure. It says the square footage of an accessory structure shall not be larger than a primary structure, but it does not have any height restriction. So how do we know that it has to be subordinate?
So I think
Somewhere
that's
else?
not included in the text because it's not changing. Let me pull up the UDO.
Oh, it says it below. Sorry. It looks like it says it in C. The maximum height of an accessory structure shall not exceed the greater of 2 stories and 32 feet or be the height of the primary structure in feet.
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Removes it from A.
I see. Okay, yeah, that was confusing. That it just tootled down the page. Okay, great. And then there was some question, I believe it was Commissioner. Oh, sorry, me? No, okay. I think it was Commissioner Cease was regarding the same section, actually 5.4.2. He was asking about striking 7 and the positioning on the lot. And at the time, there was some conversation about consistency with the intent of SCAD, but I was wondering if you could just speak a little more to that.
Yeah, so essentially it's going back to what I was talking about earlier with the change from like the front building line to the rear building line. And so we changed that language to match, since an accessory dwelling unit by its definition is an accessory structure. And so we were having the ordinance essentially say 2 different things about where an accessory dwelling unit could go. And so that's why we removed that portion. Namely, we were having staff in the DSC who were a little unclear as to where that was supposed to go. It was leaving it to the interpretation realm, so we diverted to the intent of SCAD, since this is not a policy document or a policy initiative, excuse me.
And so part of that, is there another section that talks about placement that I'm not reading in here?
So accessory structure 5.42B, let me see, hold on, let me go back to the UDO. So 5.4.1B1 says that accessory structures associated with a single family or duplex structure shall be located to the rear of the front building line of the primary structure.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a council member? Thank you. Colleagues? Councilmember Baker.
Hi, yeah, I'm comfortable with most of this language. I do have a couple questions. I do like seeing the removal of single-family and duplexes from CI, OI, CG, and IL districts. I thought that was a good change. I wanted to ask, just what is the, and I see it's specific for civic uses, what is the motivation behind increasing the number of units subject to site plan review, the 5.42B16?
Yeah, so SCAD initially listed both of those. It had 20 in 372 under applicability, and then it had 10 in the other section. So since council had approved it as 20 at its most gratuitous portion of code, we just made them match, because otherwise the code was in direct contradiction of itself.
Okay. So that's a cleanup that just matches with SCAD. And it looks, I mean, this one looks like it's specific. It says for certain civic uses as indicated in section 5.2. So it's not general to anything that proposes 10 accessory dwelling units or 15 accessory dwelling units. It's specific to when there's these specific civic uses listed in 5.2.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So it has to go within 5.2 and then meet all of those subsets of 5.4.2B1B. Okay,
thank you. 683C, can I just get a quick explanation on the reasoning behind the removal of the language around the main entrance?
Yeah, so that is a design requirement. State law says that anything within the residential building code should not have design requirements, and so that was removed.
Okay. Sorry, and main entrance. So that's the term that we think that's a design requirement?
Yes.
Okay. So we can't So we're considering a design requirement just where entrances on buildings can or cannot be?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think some of this stuff I don't love everything in here, but I think I'm comfortable with most of it. I will just say, sort of generally, reading through this and thinking about accessory dwelling units in Durham, it feels a little bit like scope creep, accessory dwelling units, where increasingly they're no longer accessory and they're just becoming dwelling units, and we are sort of freeing up what you can do with accessory dwelling units, which I love accessory dwelling units when they're accessory and small and provide that special kind of use and that special kind of space. And when you have a single family house and 1 or 2 accessory dwelling units with access onto an alley. But we've sort of made accessory dwelling units, you can have more of them, you can create like a little village, you can have larger accessory dwelling units, and so I'm just pointing this out. It just kind of feels a little bit like scope creep, like the accessory is being taken out of the ADU, and it's almost losing a little bit of its meaning when it comes to what an accessory dwelling unit is and what it does. So that's something that I'm just keeping an eye on. We'll be looking at as we move forward with the UDO rewrite. For the most part, I'm comfortable with most of what's in here, especially with some of the clarification that you've provided. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Ritz, please.
I just have one question. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just one question for staff. As you know, we pay close attention to the Planning Commission written comments in all our packets. And so I see here that the Planning Commission supported this omnibus packet of changes 7-1, although the comments there are fairly thin, only a couple comments. So I wonder if you could just clarify, did this kind of zip through the Planning Commission, or was there larger discussion just not reflected in written comments, or just give me some sense of like, yeah, what happened?
Yeah. I don't want to say that it breezed through Planning Commission. I will say I don't go to every Planning Commission, so I can't really speak to amount of attention. I will say that generally that these are proposed as just being technical changes. Larger text amendments have engagement, lots of different coordination among, different departments, et cetera. We have like a much bigger process, which is what we're undertaking with the UDO rewrite. So I imagine that the fact that it's an omnibus, which is not supposed to have any sort of larger policy initiative, I feel like as though that's probably why you don't have a lot of comments or very long comments from the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, Councilmember Freeman, please.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I really just wanted to track back to the chart, and I'm going to get to that page. But essentially, I just wanted to understand if there was any look at, if you're moving more of these accessory dwelling units and more of this to in a way that it doesn't go through or does go through site plan review, is there any way that you could relook at the site plans being posted as well? Because I noticed that they're not. Is there a reason why you didn't consider that in this?
Can you clarify, do you mean site plans being posted as in by right development being available online?
Yes.
Gotcha. I know that we were doing that for a while. Sarah, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Sarah Young with the Planning Department. That is something that we will be able to do once we get our Land Development Office replacement, which is the permitting software we use. So we are excited about doing that. That's in the works coming up.
And then just, as I was trying to capture, Ms. Standback usually sends an email, and I just wanted to, is she still on the line? Because the level of detail that she shared, I just want to make sure that we didn't miss anything. I didn't miss anything specifically.
I wanted to know about the parking, if they were changing the parking, because they said at the beginning that some of that had been removed. And, based upon what was there, I wanted to make sure that they weren't making changes to that.
No, the only change that we've made to parking is that there were still a few parts in the ordinance that referenced required parking, and we clarified there is a portion of the ordinance that says that if you provide a certain number of required parking spaces, that you still have to provide amenities. So we did remove the fact that said required, but those amenities are still required. So I think it's something like if you provide a few hundred spaces, there's like a bus shelter, park and ride sort of facility. But we did not make any changes to parking outside of what SCAD changed.
So just specifically, would the ADA handicap accessible parking spots not be required at this point, is what you're saying?
So those are determined by the building code. And so the building code will require those.
Thank you. And then also under Ms. Stanback also mentioned, I think I caught it was before you started with 7.9.1. There was another one before that I missed.
Okay, so 7.9.1, I'll do that one first. I will say that I did not respond to Ms. Steenback's comments, so that's my apologies on that. So the reason that changed is that building code requires that there is positive drainage away from the foundation. That is something that we made more difficult through the text amendment process. So through that amendment, excuse me. So we are simply altering that piece of code to ensure that people can still meet the building code. And as far as the as applicable, I think that's because that clause initially said must go before the health department or the state as applicable, but now it is just the state. And that language was floated to environmental health, who are the ones that do a lot of the coordinating or do the coordinating with the state on those wastewater systems.
And to that point, I think there was someone else who mentioned the harm to a resident neighboring structure. Is there any recourse that we're setting up in place to address that? Because I feel like this is going through a lot less, like a lower level of oversight, and it's just kind of like going to happen by right. So where's the recourse for residents in the community that might be affected by the water running into their foundation?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately that is a civil issue. We did not change the code beyond making it easier to meet the required building code. I will say that that's definitely something that we have to think about as we're increasing density through the UDO rewrite. Given that this is not supposed to be a larger policy initiative, we just changed the language so that people could still meet building code. But I do think that's something that we need to consider as we're intensifying in the urban core.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's all I have right now.
Thank you, Councilman Baker.
Okay, I think I've whittled it down to, I just want to come back to this question about the projects consisting of more than changing 10 to 20 units shall be subject to site plan review, and that's for certain civic uses as indicated in section 5.2 use categories. And you're saying this is making it, can you just describe that again? We're making that consistent with another section of the UDO?
Yep, that's in 372, which is the applicability under site plan. And so SCAD had both 20 in 372 and 10 in 5.4.
So like today, if a project came forward that fit into this provision, you would say, actually, this is just an old number. We're actually looking at the 20 number anyway.
So it's actually
would cause confusion.
They're actually the numbers are the same age, which makes it worse, I think.
The numbers are what?
The numbers are the same age. So both of those were put in during SCAD, and I guess it was just maybe a mistake on their part.
Okay. Are we concerned at all about that? About raising that so that you can build so many units without there being any site plan review?
So technically 20 was already approved by council through SCAD, so we're just making it across the board the same throughout the ordinance. those were definitely concerns raised through SCAD and approved through council. So I think that's definitely something that needs to be considered, but not in the space of an omnibus.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I actually really appreciate that. Yeah, because I think I was an opponent of much of what was in SCAD. So, you know, some of this stuff gives me heartburn, but I also am a fan of consistency within legal documents. So thank you for that clarification, and I am comfortable with voting to approve this.
Director Young.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify a couple of things that have come up. And one is Councilmember Baker had questions about the aesthetic controls limitations that we have. And so I went back and I thought it would be good just for everyone to kind of hear what is covered or not covered. Yeah, design controls, yeah. The original legislation was called Design and Aesthetic Controls. And so I went back, and it dates from like 2015, and it included this, for the purposes of this subsection, the phrase building design elements means exterior building color, type or style of exterior cladding material, style or materials of roof structures or porches, exterior non-structural architectural ornamentation, location or architectural styling of windows and doors, including garage doors, the number and types of rooms, the interior layout of rooms, and then it goes on to say, building design elements does not include any of the following: height, bulk, orientation, location of a structure, buffers, and a list of more traditional kind of zoning things. So I just wanted to share that so folks know where it is that we get the definition of what elements we consider those design control, limited by those design controls.
Can you state where that was again?
Sure, that was part of the original legislation. Since that time, 160D, the planning statutes from cities and counties were merged, and I don't think that same wording, I'd have to go back and check, but that is where the wording originally came from that defined what it was the original session law that created that.
And then the 2015?
That was around 2015. Since then, after that, 160D was the merger of the planning statutes from counties 153A and 160A cities into a 160D. And that exact wording, I'm not sure carried through, but that is definitely what is considered. Like, I'm not sure that that definition is still there, but that is the working definition that everyone uses.
Yeah, because in 2015, it was single family and duplex. And then through 160D, they broadened the definition to anything subject to
the residential building code.
The residential building code.
And then recently, the residential building code was expanded to now include triplex and quads. So here we have this kind of progressive movement. But I just wanted to give that additional bit of context for folks. The other thing is a quick clarification on the height of ADUs. That language came from another section that was already modified by SCAD, and again, for consistency's sake, we're just copying that same language. It does, I wanted to clarify something that Robin said, which is if you had a very short primary structure, you could potentially have an ADU that is taller than that structure, but it would still be capped to either the height of the structure or I think it was, yeah, whatever, I don't have the wording pulled up. But I just wanted to clarify that you could have a very short primary structure and a taller ADU.
Anyone else? Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, staff. I'll be supporting this. I don't know how many of the things I've voted on over the years, and to Councilmember Ritz's point, probably the reason why the Planning Commission comments were so thin are these tend to be non-controversial. It's a text amendment. It's not an amendment to the UDO itself. It's really a glorified proofreading exercise to consistency and terms. These are always done in light of existing law. There is absolutely no incentive or benefit for our staff to, through subterfuge or any other kind of way, try and make substantive changes to the law. It would be more of a headache for them to try and substantively change through the UDO than not. So I'm comfortable, but this has been a good primer, and I think for those watching, and I really do appreciate the conversation from our colleagues to kind of demystify some of this. But But these are always done in light of existing law. And there's absolutely no incentive for it to be otherwise for the staff because they get in a lot of trouble if they try and do anything other than that. So I think the Planning Commission got this one right. And if there are no other comments, I'm going to declare this public hearing closed.
I was just going to ask, I know that staff noted some area of distinction that you couldn't cover. Is there any list of those areas that we should be tracking as we move forward?
Things that we did not include within the omnibus?
Well, not just what was included, but from what you're, so just in this proofreading of this omnibus or of the text commitments, is there anything that you can highlight, or is there any list that has been highlighted that shows where we still need some work because there are differences?
Do you mean differences between us and state law, or differences between what we would like to see in the ordinance currently?
Both.
Okay. So as far as state law, as far as I know, we are in compliance. I have not read all session law. So hopefully that is all good. As far as what we would like to see, we have a definite running list within the department that we are using to further our conversations with the consultants as they work through the UDO. I will also place a plug. The UDO consultants are doing the third Code Connect this Thursday at 6 p.m. virtual via Zoom. They will be talking about the zoning districts. But to answer your question, we do have an internal running list that we're using throughout that process. But obviously there can be some subjectivity within that. Planners are opinionated throughout our staff.
Thank you, that was all.
Thank you, council members. I'm going to entertain a motion, number one, the public hearing is closed, by the way. I'm going to entertain a motion, number one, to adopt an ordinance amending the Unified Development Ordinance incorporating revisions to Article 3, Applications and Permits, Article 4, Zoning Districts, Article 5, Use Regulations, Article 6, District Intensity Standards, Article 7, Design Standards, Article 9, Landscaping and Buffering, Article 10, Parking and Loading, Article 11, Sign Standards, Article 12, Infrastructure and Public Improvements, Article 14, Nonconformities, and Article 17, Definitions.
So
moved.
There a motion and a
Second,
second. Clerk, would you please open the vote? Would you please close the vote and then report out?
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain motion number two to adopt a consistency statement as required by NCGS Section 160D-605.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote? Please close the vote and report out.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. That matter is disposed of. We move now to item number 18, zoning map change, Duke Central Campus Edition. This is a public hearing, and I will declare this public hearing open, and I'll start with a report from the staff. Good evening.
Good evening. Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, honorable council members. Good evening. I'm Andy Lester with the Planning Department, and it's good to be with y'all. A request for a zoning map change has been received from Rachel Satterfield of Duke University and Durham Realty, Inc. for 60 parcels of land totaling 154.57 acres and located just west of downtown Durham. The current zoning is office and institutional with the development plan, commercial general with the development plan, residential, urban, multifamily, commercial neighborhood, compact design core with a development plan, university and college with a development plan. The applicant proposes to change this designation to university and college with a graphic development plan to allow for future college and institutional uses. The properties are currently designated institutional campus in the place type map. The proposed university and college with a graphic development plan zoning is generally consistent with the designated place type. Thank you. Staff and the applicant are here for any questions.
Thank you very much for that report. Colleagues, any questions for staff relative to this case? Councilmember Cook, thank you.
Yes, thanks. Hi. Okay, so my understanding of this is that in order to move some of these parcels to the UCD designation, they have to rezone all of the parcels. Is this We're looking at a listing of like 60, but there's only really 10 or so that they're looking to rezone. Is that correct?
Technically. So basically, there is a scattering of essentially Duke parcels that were not zone UC. I think the intent of the applicant was to rezone those parcels under one development plan. And because they were disconnected, they needed to be contiguous with one another to do that one development plan. And because the majority of the parcels were in an existing development plan, a lot of those commitments were sort of translated into this overall new zoning district.
Okay, I think I'm a little bit confused about why we have the list of the many parcels when we're literally only looking at those 10, right? We're looking at just the 10. I have the REIDs for all of them, but I'm not sure that that's helpful.
The proposal is for 60 parcels. Technically, you have to look at all of them. But those coming into a UC district are only 10.
Okay. Is there any change in taxation or the way that these parcels can be taxed if they change their zoning?
I'm unsure about that.
Thank you. Those are all my questions for staff.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, anyone else? All right, this public hearing is open. Mr. Ghosh, welcome. How much time do you anticipate needing?
5 minutes.
Please put 7 minutes on the clock.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the City Council. My name is Neil Ghosh. I'm an attorney at the Morningstar Law Group, 700 West Main Street here in Durham. And I'm representing Duke University for this rezoning request. We've been working on this rezoning and another one, which we have withdrawn for a number of years. Actually kind of hard to believe that we're here, and unfortunately we're here tonight without our main point of contact from Duke, a Dem. He is out of the country on a much deserved vacation. But nevertheless, we stand before you ready to present a full case here. Well, let me first start by thanking Mr. Lesser for his presentation. This is a complicated, or I should say unique, rezoning request. And as has been referred to, we are essentially adding 10 parcels to an existing UC zoning district. The existing UC zoning district, I guess the best way for me to explain it, it has a zoning case number. It's P0316, I believe it is. And that is the zoning case number for the UC zoning district. And we are adding 10 parcels to that zoning district. If this rezoning were approved, all of those parcels would be zoned UCD. And instead of it being referred to as P0316, it would be this zoning case number instead. So that's essentially what's happening here. The zoning on all of the 50 parcels that are already zoned UC that are part of this zoning application is not changing. We have worked with staff a lot on how to go about this rezoning, and nothing is materially changing about any of the zoning that currently exists on the 50 parcels already zoned UC. We have updated some of the language on the zoning commitments. For example, back then, we used the concept, the parcel identification number or PIN number. That has been changed to real estate identification number, REIDs. So we updated the language like that. But generally speaking, all of the conditions that were previously associated with the 50 parcels remain associated with the 50 parcels, and we are adding 10 parcels. Over time, Duke has acquired parcels and continues to acquire parcels around the city that are not zoned UC. UC, of course, is a zoning district that was created specifically for our institutions of higher education. So there's a UC district for Duke, there's a UC district for Central as well. They are essentially the same zoning district. They have some nuance between the two of them. But that is what Duke is trying to do, is rezone property that they own and change it to the zoning district that this city specifically created for Duke. That's what this zoning request is about. I'm happy to tell you, so we've had many community conversations that have resulted in, well, really it was a lot about East Campus rezoning, which we have withdrawn. The Central Campus rezoning really hadn't received as much attention from the community, but we did have many community conversations about it, and it was considered robustly, I would say, at the Planning Commission. We're proud that the Planning Commission had voted to recommend approval by a vote of, I believe, 8-1. And our team is available to answer any questions that you might have. We have a couple of our folks here. Will Tricomi, he's with the legal team, I guess, at Duke. And Adam Klein is also with Duke. Thank you for your time. Look forward to answering any questions and having your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't have any cards for this public hearing, and I don't believe there's anyone in queue virtually. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in chamber who wishes to speak on this matter? This is a public hearing. If not, I'm going to bring it back to the rostrum before my honorable colleagues. Any questions or comments? Colleagues, Councilmember Cook, please.
All right. Thank you, Attorney Ghosh, for that presentation. So at the Planning Commission, which I'm realizing more and more that I am the only person that watches those, there were some comments, and this was back in April, that the city and your client had different ideas regarding a bike path and mobility, and you stated that you were going to have a conversation or further conversation with the city and your client, and I was wondering if that conversation happened and what the
We have not had a further conversation with the city about it. We have, this conversation would take place at the time that Duke is actually developing over in that area. So this is over in the area where Elf, Elba, and Pratt, if you're familiar with those streets. There are 2 city sidewalk projects, and the comment or the request from transportation was to coordinate some sidewalk and bicycle connections, 10-foot shared path along those streets. And Duke's vision for that same area is aligned with the goals of the city to create more pedestrian and bicycle connectivity. However, I think they have a different vision than simply following the existing street network, which is kind of a grid in that area. And so they have a different concept that they have worked on previously, actually prior to my involvement with Duke. So I don't actually know a whole lot about the history of that, but there are no, I mean, one way or another, bicycle and pedestrian connectivity would take place in this section. I think the specific concern, well, there's 2. Specific concern is probably if Duke would have it their way, not in the way that transportation has suggested here, which is essentially a 10-foot side path along the street. The other thing is the commitment or the request from transportation did not come with a timing component, which is a little bit confusing. There are no plans that Duke has for development that are associated with this rezoning, or another way of saying that is, the rezoning request is not related to any specific development that Duke is trying to do. So the commitment doesn't carry with it a timing component, which made it unclear as to when the city was expecting it to be delivered. But Duke would invest in the pedestrian and bicycle transportation infrastructure in this area when they are developing in that area.
So you've actually laid out my next question very well, which is why we are seeing this change without any development plan.
Yeah, that's because of the nature of the UC zoning district itself. So one of the unique features of the UC zoning district, and I think is specific, I mean, this is kind of the point of it, is that the UC district allows all properties that are zoned UC to be considered jointly for infrastructure purposes all of the time, right? So this allows Central or Duke to kind of master plan their campus. Stormwater, for example, can be handled for development on any UC property, on any other property also zoned UC. The uses can be spread that way. The way Duke's planning process works, they have a conceptual master plan for the university. These parcels, these 10 parcels, are included on that conceptual master plan. The conceptual master plan, as it stands right now, does not show any new development on any of these 10 parcels. And the reason it doesn't show that is because they're not zone UC. Unless they're zone UC, the way that they can think about developing them, that changes depending on what they're zoned. So this is consistent with the way that Duke has approached their UC zoning generally, I mean, historically, I should say.
Well, what you've just said is literally every application we get, which is the land use will change with the zoning. And we all the time get plans for that use. Why is it that Duke is unable to give us any plans for the use of these? I understand that they're not yet zoned for that use, but
No, because they literally do not have plans on how these parcels would be developed if they were zoned UC.
but you said that they've been working on rezoning these for a long time. Why?
Well, we've been working on the rezoning application a long time. I mean, the reason is because this is a unusual zoning request. I mean, we've gone through a couple iterations on how to approach it.
I mean, I guess I'm just stuck on the fact that this is how things come to us. And when you put an application in for a zoning change, you don't know if your zoning change will be granted or not, but you're still coming up with a plan and presenting a plan. Whereas you're asking us to make a change without having any idea what the plan is, but there is a need for the change by your client, or you wouldn't be here. They wouldn't be paying you, I assume, to come here and present this case. And so there is some driving fact behind getting the change, and then you want us to do the change, and then I mean, this came up multiple times. I mean, it was comments for the East Campus one, but I think it's all applicable, that the zoning is broad, and so we have no control over the changes that are made afterwards, as opposed to how this process usually works, which is you come before this body with proposals, and we decide if the change comes after. I'm just curious also about the timing of this, because how long have y'all been working on this rezoning?
Oh gosh, I mean, I don't really know. More than 2 years, I know that much.
Do you know when all of these parcels were purchased?
Oh, over many years, yes. I mean, I don't know specifically, but yeah, I mean, they've been, I mean, Duke is acquiring properties just at a regular interval. They acquire properties continuously, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know how old the oldest one, was when it was acquired, or the newest one. And they own other, for what it's worth, they own other property in the city that is not zone UC, that also is not the request of, being requested to be rezoned. These specific parcels are on the periphery of property already zoned UC, and that's why they're essentially just trying to bring it into the fold of campus.
The oldest one is 113388, which was purchased in 1968, 2 plots of land for $10. Pull the deeds for all of them. There's a significant number of them bought in the 90s, early 2000s. It's interesting to have this come before us with no plan in place, no even hint at what it might be. There's some conversation about, oh yes, in the future, we'll work with staff to develop something that works, but there will be no enforcement mechanism at that time once the zoning is changed. And I've looked at the master plan. That's a policy document just as well as, our comprehensive plan is, and Lord knows we've had conversations about that up here, but it's not required, right? It's a guiding policy document, and so it not having anything in there, I don't know, to me, it feels like too many unknowns, and I'm not really sure what the press is about doing it right now, like why the timing is coming up right now. These plots of land have been acquired over decades, and I just feel like that I would like to see a plan before making the decision on rezoning this property. That's all, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, anyone else? Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you. I just had a couple questions, I think more for staff. I was just looking at sorry, I had it open, attachment 10, comprehensive plan consistency review. It's our table that staff does for us. And so my understanding would be, and I'm just using the transportation one because it was clear there was an ask from transportation. I hear Attorney Ghosh saying, we'd be happy to work with the city, but if rezoned, they don't have to, right? Like they can do what they want, essentially. And that might be a better question for Bill, Judge. So there's it's the 10-foot shared path, right? I get that that's what we are moving to as a city. In theory, we could say yes to this tonight. they could decide, well, for Duke, we don't need a 10-foot shared path, even though that's the city's vision. And then, but if we've rezoned it and they come up with something different, like it's on their terms, correct?
Correct. So Bill Judge, Assistant Transportation Director. I think the main difference, so right now they are Elf and Elba and Pratt, those streets are all still public streets. So if they were to be rezoned and then come in with site plans to develop even within the UC, they would still have to meet the sidewalk requirements, which would be filling in any missing sidewalks, but that would limit it to basically a 5-foot sidewalk along the frontage. So we were trying to get that full bicycle and pedestrian connection from our sidewalk project there at the corner of Fulton and Pratt Street over to essentially the pedestrian signal there in front of the emergency drive, trying to get a connection through there utilizing primarily the existing public street so that it would be something that the city could maintain and that the public would have access to.
Perfect. And then to Attorney Ghosh's point with a timing part of it, I was just a little bit lost that there wasn't a clear timing mechanism. Is it because there's not any site plan essentially to tie it to, like often?
Yeah, they apologize if that was not clear in our comments. Typically, those would be prior to a certificate of occupancy, at least for those parcels or that area, knowing that parcels may get recombined. It can get a little bit tricky into how you would actually write that into a text commitment, but we certainly would not, since there are other areas where they might develop, I don't know that we would require or look for them to build that connection if they're doing, work in another part of campus that's subject to this same zoning, since it is quite a large area. We would tie it to basically activity in that area.
So there is a mechanism to get it if we needed it?
Yeah, we just would have to probably work on some wording, knowing that parcel numbers or other things may change in the future.
Okay, so in general, and I said this to the applicant earlier, if this was just a regular application, seeing that so many of our policies were not met, we ask a lot from the development community that is significantly smaller and less resourced than Duke University. That last time I checked, I had, this was 7-8 years ago, had billions and billion-dollar endowment. And so I feel kind of, my suggestion is that we continue this case. I am one council member so that we can get clarity on some of these things. I think the applicant wants this rezoning. It makes sense from just a land use. It's NCCU has it. This is not anything different. I know that Duke is in their master plan. They have a lot of questions. But we all know that Duke has also not been the best actor sometimes. And so there is community distrust, and there's certainly distrust on this council around Duke being the best actor possible as the largest private employer and the largest landholder in Durham County. And so my job is to do as much due diligence as I do with somebody who's trying to get a rezoning for a duplex as the largest private landowner. So my ask to my colleagues would be if folks are open to a continuance so we can kind of dig into the weeds. I'm happy to have more in-depth conversations with the applicant so that I feel comfortable with a yes, because tonight I'm certainly not comfortable with a yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Riss.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to follow up on those comments from my colleague, Councilwoman Caballero. And so my questions are probably similar, and the answers may be kind of the same, but I just want to note these. So, and this goes back to the consistency review. So I know Duke just announced a large climate initiative. I was surprised there was no commitment to sustainability at all in this. And again, it may be because it's not clear what the use is going to be. But that's, again, for me, was like a big sort of like big question mark. I figured that would be like a simple thing for Duke to say, yes, we want to address and exceed the UDO in terms of climate sustainability. The other one is on stormwater. I know that the commitment was to meet the UDO. Again, given Duke's big investment in the environment, I was expecting some kind of innovative stormwater management stuff here. But again, it may all be because there's not clear what the applicant wants to do. But again, those are for me more of the same kind of questions. Like I would support the continuance because I'd love to see some more clarity on some of those questions. So, yeah.
Yeah, just to respond to that. So I recognize how unusual this is. However, I will say that is exactly what the UC district is set up to do, is provide flexibility for our institutions of higher education. And so part of the issue here is that Duke does not have plans, specific plans, on how any of these parcels are going to be developed, which is not inconsistent with how any other property that Duke currently owns that's zoned UC is situated. They own property that is zoned UC on which there is no current development, for which they have no plans for development. But the zoning allows them to figure out, so from an engineering standpoint, for example, you were talking about stormwater. Any other development, any other zoning district, if you are developing whatever, just a building, you're required to figure out how you're going to control for stormwater on the same parcel that is being zoned. Duke and Central have the ability to kind of spread that out, right? So you can build something on one parcel and have that drain to another parcel that is zoned UC and you know, deal with stormwater that way. Also, it's not a surprise that as one of our educational institutions, they have multiple fields of study. It's unclear what all or any of these parcels would be used for, but I want to give an example of like a farm, like an academic farm. So the way research gets conducted there might not lend itself to some of the sustainability requirements or, I guess a sustainability initiative that Duke has placed on itself, generally speaking, right? Like, you have to do the research to figure out how to do something more sustainably. If we're talking about simple vertical construction, I think that, again, there are processes that the university does that might not lend themselves to some of those. Like it or not, the city has it as well. Industrial complexes, things like that. Duke has wastewater management systems and things like that. We can't tell you that every building that's going to be built on these 10 parcels is going to meet a specific standard. That's why we can't make that kind of commitment on the zoning, right? But that doesn't negate the fact that Duke has a commitment as an institution to, fighting climate change. Some of the commitments that I think that probably responds to your question, or your comment, rather.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleague, Councilmember Freeman, did you have anything, or before I go to Councilman?
Just the one question. I was just trying to understand if I'm not sure who could answer it, but does North Carolina Central have stormwater management on campus? I was just checking. Thank you.
Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, I echo the sentiments of my colleagues with the desire for a continuance for this case, or we could defer consideration as well. I think that some important points were raised. The point about the unfulfilled transportation request, the comprehensive plan policies, and really, I think, three of my colleagues, I think, summarized some of the sentiments, I think, very well. The relationship between Duke and Durham, the desire and the need for co-planning and collaborating and cooperating with one another in a democratic and fair relationship between the two, Duke being the largest landowner in the city. I think there's a real opportunity here for us to engage in this democratic relationship. We don't have any information, we don't have enough information about what is happening. The UC zoning district is a great zoning district for someone who owns property within the UC zoning district because it has that amount of flexibility. On the other hand, Duke owns very important properties and a significant amount of those properties in core parts of the city of Durham. And so understanding how all these pieces work together, I think is going to be very important. So moving forward, I hope that we can have those kinds of conversations between folks who are leading this effort on Duke's side, as well as those up here on the dais and others in leadership of the city. Those are my comments.
Thank you, council members. Well, I think the zoning planning commission got this one right again, and I would point to the lack of commentary from the planning commission. I'm not going to use the particularities of this case as a cudgel to go at Duke with any other beefs I may have. And may I just say, there's no other elected official in this city that has gone at Duke. When we had the light rail issue, and I recommended eminent domain, I almost had to move out of Durham, and nobody else had an appetite for it. So there's nobody in this city that has, said, if you want to hold Duke accountable, let's go to the mat. And I want to resist employing a standard that I would not employ with North Carolina Central to Duke in this particular case. I think it was Chris Rock who said that, black people's relationship with America is difficult. It's like your uncle who paid for you to go to college but molested you. It's a difficult relationship. Duke, Willard Street had a lot of Duke money in it. Our Office of Survivor Care, Duke money. Other issues with Duke. I mean, it's been a complicated relationship in history, but I want to be careful not to use this particular case to prosecute other legitimate conversations and questions that we may have with that institution that I think are better carried out in different contexts. And for the record, we have voted on rezonings without development plans. What we had was a list of what was not going to happen. The UC district, I mean, it's a university. They're not going to build a strip club. I don't see how that's going to forward their mission. And there are things that we know are germane to the forwarding of universities to their mission. And so I'm not going to, as tempting as it might be, employ a standard to them that I would not employ to North Carolina Central. There are folk on Fayetteville Street, I get emails from folk who are concerned about property acquisitions by Central on Fayetteville Street and HBCU Central. And there are black folk along that Fayetteville Street corridor who have some issues with Central's land acquisitions as well and some of their policies. So I'm not going to, I don't want to bring a different standard to substitute for legitimate conversations we need to be having in other contexts. I don't think this is controversial at all. They already own the parcels. It's not like we're going to get them as a city. We know the list of things that universities are going to do and not going to do as we've approved other plans without, I don't know how many we've approved, and we've asked, do you have a development plan? Say, okay, but here's what we're committing, what we're not going to do. Gas station, electronic gaming center, all kinds of things. And we know that the UC, this designation is for university and institutional purposes. So I think the Planning Commission got this one right. I'm not interested in a continuance because if Duke knew what they were going to do, they would have said it already. So I don't know what a continuance is. I'm not interested in forcing them to make something up on the spot or tell me what they're going to do. I'd rather just vote it down and let them come again. They got, as you said, they got a lot of money and a lot of smart people. If they knew what they were going to do, they would have said it tonight. So, and they're not asking for a continuance. I'm not interested in helping them. They got more money than I do. I'm not interested in helping them come up with something with what they want to do. Either vote it down or vote it up would be my recommendation. But I don't really have an appetite to press Duke on what they plan on doing. Like I wouldn't Central it either. Those are my comments.
Thank you. And I'm just trying to, I was trying to find in the UC zoning, I know there was something in it that stated specifically that when you came for a rezoning, there should be a development plan attached or a new development plan submitted. It didn't say like should, it actually said shall, which I interpret to mean, as usual, you have to submit something. And I'm just trying to understand if that one-page map is supposed to be like the development plan that's updated?
Staff.
From 2020?
Staff will respond to your inquiry, council member.
Yeah, so there is the development plan for the entire 60 parcels. I think the graphic development plan, I think on sheet 3, shows the entire UCD zoning district, and on, I think, 4 and 5 shows sort of the specific characteristics of the 10 that they're bringing into the UCD. And typically what that means is that they'll For the UCD, they need to illustrate the transitional use area, which is essentially a buffer for the UC district. So anytime it abuts a zoning district that is not UC, there's extra restrictions on that perimeter of the district, and that's illustrated in the development plan.
And the reason I bring it up is because I also had to just take a look and just see what North Carolina Central had, and I noticed that their plan was like 118 pages, and it covered a whole variety of different things, and I was trying to figure out where Duke's plan like that was that submitted, and it may have been submitted previously, and we're supposed to refer back to it, but I didn't see it in our documents this evening.
Could you rephrase that, please?
So for North Carolina, the other organization in the city that has a UC zoning that previously I know has come and requested a zoning map change, submitted a 118-page master plan around what they were doing on the campus. And I just want to know, because I'm assuming there is, and it's just missing, a document that shows what Duke is planning to do for the current UC zoning, and then, of course, with this request, a new additional UC zoning on those 10 parcels, it shall be submitted with the updated master plan. And so I'm just making sure that I'm not missing something.
Good question, council member. If you look at attachment, it's number 9 or H, whichever way you want to look at it, that is the master plan that Duke submitted as part of this.
Yeah, that's the problem.
The ordinance does not specify what is contained in a master plan or what they submit, so I will defer to them if they have another document that is more like the central one.
And I can share the central website link if that helps, but I do think it might be helpful to kind of come back with a little bit more context for what's been going on and how the UC plan, like how the UC zoning has been used over the last, just from 2020, looked like from the last plan or the date from this map. I'm sure there's been some work around what the master plan is for the campus. It'd be helpful to have that context in this conversation. Even if it's not specific to the exact sites that you're trying to develop, there just needs to be some more effort in this.
Yeah, and can I ask a question? You said, I'm not familiar with Central's master plan. So this was something they submitted to the city when they were rezoning?
Well, they've made it available publicly. And so it's publicly available to anyone can pull it up. And
Please do send it to me. I'm just not familiar with it, so I really can't speak to it. Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, so much. I would say that, I'm familiar with Central's master plan. It's not a legally binding document. We all make plans. And you can go line by line of Central's plans. There are some things that have been realized or some things that haven't been realized, some things that probably won't be realized. But I do want to take caution not to represent plans as hardcore, inflexible governing documents. They are not. So again, I will just, Councilmember Cook, I'll yield.
Well, I think we might be going towards the same place, which is that I think there were 3 of you that asked for a continuance, and I'm just wondering if you could give me a little clarity. I'm trying to decide what I would like to see happen tonight. So what we're looking for from the applicant, what would be needed in order for you, like very specifically in order for you, because I know we heard about transportation, but if you could just be more specific.
Yeah, I would like to have a better understanding. This is just me. So if you look at our policy document on our comp plan, I tend to use that when I make decisions. And so I would like to have a better, so yeah, I understand that you don't have a specific rezoning around sustainability, but you still can say, we're gonna have a goal around X amount for anything that we rezone in that. Like, there's no reason not to have a goal. There's no reason not to have goals around housing or affordability or whatever it is. There has to be some understanding or some clarity, I guess is what I'm looking for than just a broad rezoning. This is the leverage we have. I mean, Councilmember Baker always talks about the power of zoning and land use, and like, I want to wield it. And that's it. And so, and I expect, and again, I had conversations with both Attorney Ghosh and Adam Klein earlier today. They were very gracious to hear me, so this was not a surprise to them that I was going to ask for a continuance. And often when we have been a little bit more deliberative, there have been plenty of cases where there's been a continuance and we get a better product, we get a better outcome. And I think Attorney Ghosh knows that, like, I like to get to yes. Like, I'm not a council member who likes to turn down things. I think that time and money have been spent, and so I want to honor that. And so looking at those policies, getting some clarity with transportation staff on any of the things around the shared use path, this is the opportunity to do it, and so I would like to take it. Again, I'm one council member, but I think that a pause, which is what a continuance gets us, will ultimately get what the applicant wants, which is a yes vote, and it will help provide some clarity for those of us who are either on no or on the fence or having some anxiety about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a comment and a question. I appreciate Councilman Caballero's comments. I mean, for me, the clarity is college and institutional uses. And I can imagine what that looks like for a college and institutional use. I mean, the other thing is that, you know, if this ain't going to be the last time Duke wants something from us. If they screw us on this, you're coming back before us again at some point in the future for something. Duke is a significant landowner, a vested member of this community. And, you know, if they just go buck wild and build something ridiculous that has nothing to do with education or research or amenities for their students, and then come back before us asking for something else. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with the designation college and institutional uses, whether it's research labs or building for housing. But that's just me. I'm one council member. I do want to ask Mr. Ghosh, representing your client, you haven't asked for a continuance. If we grant it, what's going to happen in that time? What are y'all going to do?
Well, I think thanks for the question, Mayor Pro Tem. And I think we're getting feedback right now. I can't tell you specifically what's going to happen, but I can tell you that, you know, we're taking notes. So what would happen is we would be working on that feedback. For just by way of illustration, the transportation request, I've already gotten more clarity tonight than we've had through the process, which is, you know, to Mr. Judge's credit, you know, he said, yep, he acknowledges this doesn't have a timing component. That is problematic, but he mentioned some ideas on how to do that. I think that's something we can work with. I would say that we are open to a continuance. We have not requested it. I did talk to staff earlier about that, and my understanding is we would be requesting a continuance to the October 7th meeting based on the way the agendas are lined up. And I think that gives us time to work on some of these items.
All right, then I'd be amenable to that. Then to the staff, what is do we know what the docket's looking like thus far for that date? Or schedule, rather?
Yeah, so far we have scheduled 2 right-of-way annexations, which should be very simple and straightforward.
I'm sorry.
A little
I didn't realize
planning
my mic was
humor
on.
for you there. And then there is a consolidated annexation case and just a rezoning for an industrial site. So 2 other cases that are not right-of-way. So that's why we suggested that date, that lighter than some other agendas we have coming up.
Okay. Council, would I just keep the public hearing open until that date? All right, I'm going to poll the membership and just look for consent. I think we've crossed the 4-vote threshold. Can I get a thumbs up for continuing to October 7th? All right, opinion of the chair, it's unanimous. So this public hearing will be held over until October 7th is the date? All right. Thank you, Mr. Ghosh.
Thank you.
And just an FYI, it'll be in your inbox this evening.
Did you ask for the master plan, Councilmember Freeman?
Colleagues, do we have a question?
Is that what you had requested?
Say it again.
You asked for the master plan?
Yeah. Well, I was sharing the master plan.
Okay.
It's on our website.
Yeah, I do think that document would be helpful, Attorney Ghosh, as well.
On our website. All right. Thank you, colleagues. I think that comes to the end of our agenda with no other business coming before this council. It's August 19th, 10:25. I'm declaring this meeting adjourned. Thank you all. God bless Durham.